Hello, my fellow Westorians. Welcome back to History of Westeros podcast. I'm Aziz. We've got Sean and Ashea with us, as we usually do on Mondays. Reminder that Monday live streams every 6 p.m. at Eastern Standard Time. Well, Eastern Time. Standard. It's not always standard, is it? But is when we do the spoiler-free reviews. And on Saturdays at 3, we have spoiler-filled reviews that also serve as previews for the next episode. One thing we got today before this episode was Ashea and I did an interview with Ryan Condal, showrunner of House of the Dragon. This is on the heels of our interview with George R. R. Martin himself. Ryan actually made some comments today that are a little bit relevant to some of the lore and some of the topics that are front and center. So you're going to want to check that out. And we'll work in a little bit of what we learned today, if possible.
Yeah, you should see that on your feeds late Tuesday night, tomorrow night. And it's about 30 to 40 minutes long.
Yeah, so yeah, it went very well. We were real happy with it. And this week's episode of House of the Dragon, we're also very happy with. We got the new intro sequence, which is really cool, and we'll spend some time talking about that at a later date once we've had time to fully analyze it. The short version of explanation is in our synopsis. We have been putting out synopsis videos / podcast episodes, very short, only 9 minutes long. Good way to set you up for this and other live streams. A lot of y'all catch live streams from other podcasts as well, or just listen to the podcasts in edited form, whichever you prefer. And this is just a really good way, I think, to get yourself familiar with everything. Make sure you have all the details straight. Make sure you catch some of the themes. There's a lot to catch, as you well know, and this is our way of leading into each week. So check that out each time before you catch our live stream, certainly before our Saturday episodes as well.
But to describe it briefly, the intro credits in the show is the model of old Valyria that Viserys has been building, which some people have theorized that that's what the intro would be. And
they were right.
It follows the different bloodlines of House Targaryen through literal rivers of blood, through actual blood lines. So that is going to be a fun thing to analyze a little deeper.
Yeah, it's really excellent detail. It looks awesome, and they held it off for 1 week, Dibby, to build the surprise a little more. It certainly worked for me. I thought it was really cool, and it excuse me, it gave us a little bit of a funny thing happening on our end of the world. We had our very cool homemade intro by Bran Winslow, Bran the Builder. And since the first episode didn't have the intro sequence, a lot of people thought ours was the real intro sequence, which was very complimentary to Bran. But also, there's a lot of things they have in common, like the dripping blood was a thing she put in there, and the crowns, like Viserys' crown and Aegon's crown, those are in there.
Yeah, there's certain iconography that it makes sense that they would have in common, especially like fire and blood and bloodlines. That makes sense as well. I really thought there was a shot that the painted table was going to end up being part of the official intro, and then it would have been very close. So it's nice that they're their own things.
Yeah, it was very cool. So yeah, we'll stay tuned. We'll have more to say about that. Sean, what did you think of it? We haven't heard from you yet.
I was immediately trying to piece together what we were looking at, what these images were. Should I be recognizing sigils or something? But I became so overwhelmed with all the actual show plot line and characters and everything that I had almost forgotten about it. But then I saw someone say it was the bloodlines. I was like, oh, that's genius. And so then I go back and, look more carefully. And I'm sure there's still imagery I'm not familiar with. And in fact, at one point, I think the bloodlines kind of travel under an archway, and it looks like there's a bunch of sigils there. I know I need to pause that and look at it more closely. I want to point out that we're doing this less than 24 hours since the episode came out. And, that we get somewhere in there, ostensibly, we've got to sleep. And you guys even did this extra interview. So, it's hard to, always within the next couple of days after this, we're coming up with more stuff. And that's why there's so much interaction, in this community online. There'll be all kinds of comments. There's people, while I'm thinking about it, in the chat. Usually I go back and read through all our chats because it's too much to keep up with as we're recording, but I don't want to spoil myself. I don't want you guys to have to edit yourselves in a chat, and I don't want to spoil myself and trying to stay somewhat unsullied. So maybe later, if someone wants to message me specifically, I'm on Facebook or Twitter. If someone wants to highlight something, please let me know. But I'm sorry I'm not going through to see what you guys are saying in the chat right now.
Right on. Well, that's understandable, Sean. So last week we ended our episode with the 3x3, which is when we name the three of us name our favorite performance, our favorite plot/scene, and our favorite dragon bit. Now, it isn't necessarily favorite, it's just the one we wanted to highlight. Maybe it's one that hasn't gotten enough attention. Maybe it's one that over the course of several weeks they've built up some acclaim and we want to point it out. It's really
Maybe
open.
It's just our favorite.
Yeah, it could just be our favorite. So last week we ended with that, but we're going to start with it from now on because it's a good way to kick things off. It's a little lighter topic. Also, it allows y'all who are watching live to weigh in with your own takes, and we can incorporate that in the episode. I also put this up to our Facebook group. As usual, our Facebook group and our Discord group are the best ways to interact with us and with other Westorians in between episodes. The poll asked everyone in the Facebook group which performance was the strongest last week. I allowed multiple votes so people could pick more than one actor if they liked. Number one was Sean Brooke, who got 38% of the vote. Millie Alcock, 20%. Matt Smith, 15%. Patty Considine, 14%. So those were the standouts, the top four there.
Sean Brooke was
Emma.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So of course, part of the reason she was picked is people knew they wouldn't. She was great, first of all, but also because there wouldn't be another chance to pick her.
Chance.
Yeah. So that's kind of straightforward there, but definitely she deserves it. This week, okay, so my highlight performance, I'll start. I'm going to go with Emily Carey. I think her Alicent is a much more lifelike than the source material, which of course it is. It's a maesterly account, and the maesters often don't pay attention to the personalities of young girls. Heck, they don't often pay attention to the personalities of people in general. That's just how history kind of works. It's detached from that sort of thing. But her portrayal not only is very sympathetic, which Alicent's portrayal in Fire and Blood is not terribly sympathetic, again, because of the way it's presented and who the presenter is. But I just love how she just seems like she's barely keeping it together in some of the scenes. Like she's nervous. She knows there's a lot of pressure on her. She doesn't quite understand all the intrigue because she's 15, but she's smart enough to sense a lot of it. She understands the way she looks at her father is very telling. She shoots daggers almost the way she stares back at him when they're having interactions. Like she does not approve of what her father's forcing her to do, but she doesn't really have a choice but to go along with it. And her interactions with Viserys are very tender, even though their relationship is problematic. They do have a genuine bond. They definitely are bonding over grief. She is not faking her interest in him, even though her father would want her to if she didn't really have it. Now, I'm not saying she's romantically interested in him. That is unclear. But she likes talking to him. Their shared grief is meaningful. She likes making him feel better. So he thinks about her differently, I'm sure, but I'm focused on her right now, and I think that her portrayal really sells all this quite well. I'm very convinced.
Are we sure she's only 15?
Yes.
Could she be 16 or 17
15.
at least?
She's 15. Yeah. Yeah, she's very young. Yeah.
Yeah, there was an interview with Kim Renfro was one of the people who did the interview. I think it was a round table, but where at the beginning of the show, Rhaenyra and Alicent are 14. Obviously, a little bit of time has passed, but we hear that Rhaenyra in this episode is 15. So it's not possible for much more time to have passed for Alicent. Like, even if they're half a year apart, she's probably not even 16. Like, it's technically, maybe she could possibly be, I think she's 15. Yeah.
It's been about a half a year since episode 1, just to be made. That's made clear in a few spots. So who was your...
I'm sure we'll talk more about that through the course of this, but yeah.
Shea, who's your pick?
You know, I hate to choose just the same person as you. But you kind of convinced me more about Emily Carey. I already wanted to say Emily Carey, but I also really liked Millie Alcock. I really liked her Rhaenyra.
She's super good.
But you did convince me a lot that I think Emily Carey had more weight to carry, more burden there with her role. Yeah, to carry.
To Emily Carey. Yes, nice.
But I think I'm just gonna go with Emily Carey too for this one.
Nice. What about you, Sean? Who's your pick?
So Millie Alcock, that's Rhaenyra's.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, Rhaenyra, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's my pick. Second week in a row. I think I don't want to take away from anyone else. And sometimes I feel like sorry, I'm not keeping the actor's name up.
Patty Considine. Considine. Yeah.
Patty. Yeah.
I've been on the verge of picking him both times. He's so close. Like his role is so. Just his presence and the fact that he's in the most scenes probably of anyone.
So
when I reflect on it, I feel like he's going through a range of stuff. Mm-hmm. But as I watch it, I'm not being impressed. But Millie Alcock, both when I reflect on it and through the course of watching it, she's the one that's really hitting me as a performer.
So I did a poll in the YouTube chat, since that's a thing that we can do. Someone requested that, since they're not on Facebook or Twitter. Not everyone is on social media. So I did a little mini poll. I could only do 4 options.
Okay.
Because that's the max. I did Emily Carey, Millie Alcock, Eve Best, and Matt Smith were the 4 I chose. Just, for Rhaenys and Daemon are the other 2. Millie Alcock is currently winning. It'll end in 2 minutes, but...
yeah. And...
By the way, I think you two might be upset with you not including them in social media.
That's awesome. I'm going to pick for my favorite plot/scene. I'm going to pick the overhead shot of the Valyrian model. I stared at this for many minutes looking for detail and just in awe of how cool it is. I think Ashea has an image of it she could put up. Yeah. It is so cool. I love that so much. I mean, I'm just a real geek for the model stuff. We learned from our interview, Ryan Condal's a real geek about props. He actually has his own podcast with David Mandel, and they talk, it's all about props. It's called Stuff Dreams Are Made of. Yeah. And it's a movie props podcast there we go. So you can tell some of his love got into this.
You sure can.
Super cool.
Yeah, it's cool. You can like zoom in and see that it says Valyria in the book right there. I think that's so cool. You can just really see all these details.
Yeah, and his description of it we'll talk about later, but just that moment of looking above and looking down on that was just, I was overwhelmed with the awesomeness of that. What about you, Ashea? What was your highlight plot moment or scene?
Lena.
Little Lena.
Yeah, I love Lena, and that actress they picked is just so cute and tiny, and she's so passionate about dragons. She's just a little dragon nerd, and she's just a little girl who's interested in like, it's I compared it to like a horse girl when I was on Joe Magician's stream last night, and yeah, it's basically like that. Just the passion of being a young child.
Yeah, I wonder if Viserys was a little put off by that, because he's obviously big into the history of Valyria, but he doesn't like the dragons that much. Like, he was talking about how they're dangerous and we never should have trifled with them, and then he never took another dragon when his died, and he even talks about his own dragon being something too fearsome. But she's like, dragon, yeah, I love the dragons. Vhagar, Balerion, and maybe he was like, ooh, I don't like talking about the dragons. But I don't know. That was just he was uncomfortable in general.
Use him too.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, yeah.
What about your pick, Sean? Do you have a highlight moment here?
It's tough. There's a bunch. I'm afraid I don't have like one single one that rose above the others, other than maybe a dragon moment, which we're gonna give its own thing in a second. I'll say maybe it's also Elena's scene. Maybe it's hard for me to even like be excited about this, because it was like it's I don't know. It's mixed up with some toughness. Just the image of Viserys and Lena together. Just this.
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
12-year-old goal, and the parents even looking on. Like, I don't know. It's I will say that like it's not like a scene. It was like exciting or cool or fun to me, but it might be the scene that hit me the most. It is most affecting the rest of my thoughts around the show and the characters, So.
It was super interesting how Rhaenyra was watching them talk from a distance, and Rhaenys was watching her watch them from a distance. Yeah, that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I watched the behind-the-scenes featurette that's 22 minutes, the house the dragons built they have for each episode, and they talked about how when they built the set for the Red Keep and in King's Landing, they really wanted to make sure there were all these different vantage points where you could watch people from, and you see that when you see Daemon watching the small council, and you see Rhaenys watching both when they're picking the Kingsguard and when they're looking on over Lena. It's just, a lot of watching.
My favorite dragon moment was the singing. The dragons were communicating with each other, the way they were like making these different kinds of squeaks and howls and groans and growls, and it reminded me of whales, like the way whales communicate. It sounded like whale song to me, and I thought it was a great touch, and it expands on just the way they're giving a lot of detail and individuality to these dragons and giving them like behaviors and personalities, and I love that. It's just great detail. What about you, Ashea?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I'm naming the same scene as before, but I would say that maybe my favorite dragon moment is the mention of Vhagar there. But my favorite on-screen dragon moment is just Long Boy Caraxes. He's just a wormy long boy. He just looks so funny to me. I really, really like that design a whole lot. I think out of the dragons we've seen so far, Caraxes is my favorite design.
Nice. Sean, do you have a pick here?
Oh yeah, it was the sort of reaction to
Cyrax?
Caraxes.
Oh, Caraxes, okay.
Daemon's
Yeah,
dragon.
Caraxes, yeah.
Caraxes. All this sort of pomp and arrogance of Otto and Criston Cole walking in there, and then they're like,
"Whoops!
Oh wait, hold on,
We've gone too far.
Put your swords up. We didn't know it was gonna be this kind of party." Yeah.
Yeah.
It frustrated me on one hand that what did Otto think was gonna
Yeah.
happen?
Exactly,
There?
yeah.
The dragon wasn't gonna be a part of this, and I don't know, maybe on some level he was willing to die or just needed to make the statement or whatever. But still, I appreciate that even Criston, who probably wasn't thinking about political implications or strategy, still went from like, maybe you'll remember when I knocked you off your horse to like, oh crap, that's seriously a dragon now.
Yeah.
I don't know about this.
I'm not knocking you off that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. And I agree with you about what was Otto expecting. That's a point we'll discuss later. Like, that was another example of misrule. Like, this was not who should have been sent.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think a misrule from Viserys, but I
Yes.
think exactly what Otto wanted.
Oh, yeah. Otto wanted it, but he shouldn't have wanted it. He wanted to put Daemon down, and he maybe didn't think it through. And
I think I think he was trying to instigate Daemon to outright revolt. Like, I think he's trying to take care of Daemon, and he's like, I'm going to needle him, which is why I think it was a weird call from him, because he's putting himself at risk. I feel
that's why I don't think he was provoking
I feel
him.
like if he had just sent all of those people, but Otto hadn't gone, Daemon might have escalated that to violence, and then it would have done what Otto wanted. But Otto being there kind of...
I feel like
stopped it.
Otto made it more likely to become violent, and that's why I think it was misrule. I think the mistake was not sending Rhaenyra in the first place. She was the right person for the job, which she proved by doing it. But anyway, I can see different interpretations.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Again, I agree the mistake on Viserys' part, but I think that from Otto's perspective, he was trying to stir up trouble.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that, because like you said, he didn't bring enough men to defend himself if trouble started. It was a suicide mission if he wanted to provoke Daemon.
I mean, I guess that then the other alternative is that Otto is just completely naive and blindsided by this, which doesn't seem like he would be to me. Like, it seems like he was taking a very calculated risk there. Like, that was very dangerous. I can't imagine why he wouldn't have considered the dragon.
Yeah, like even if he thought maybe they could win some sort of skirmish, or that he could get out alive after a skirmish, back and reports on it. But that's it. Daemon's so. But what if the dragon just burned them all alive right then and there? Like, then what? Another odd moment about that was they brought the maester with them too. Like, why is he there?
I think that's more proof that they did not actually expect violence. Like, he didn't bring a lot of men. He didn't bring like he didn't bring any sort of force that could stand up to a dragon.
Violence, what did he expect? Did he expect them like, you're right, never mind, here's the egg? Like, it's weird to think what he did expect, you know?
Yeah, I think he expected that he would listen to the order of his brother, that he wouldn't obey. I don't think it's that strange that Otto didn't think it all the way through, because I think Otto was really wanted. I do think he was dishonest when he said, "Oh, it's too dangerous for you to go." He didn't mean that. It's not I don't think he thought it was dangerous at all. I think he was just saying that. I think he just wanted to be the one to shut Daemon down because he doesn't like him.
I think I agree.
I think he just wanted to one up him and didn't think that it would come to violence. But anyway, let's move on. We've spent too much time on this point. So 6 months have passed. That's roughly where we're at. The episode is called The Rogue Prince, but it reminds me of the lost translation of The Prince That Was Promised, because it's also the Rogue Princess. She goes a little rogue she goes against her father's orders, right? And to good effect. And she also sort of pushes back against Otto's wishes with the selection of the Kingsguards. And it also maybe refers to the crab feeder Kragas, who is a Prince Admiral, and he perhaps has gone beyond his mandate from the Free Cities. But that's not quite clear yet, and it's not certain either, but he's certainly one of the other princes in the story at this point. Some themes that we'll be keeping an eye on throughout this. We've got powerlessness, proving yourself. We've got privilege is a major one, especially on both ends of it. We've got lower-born characters like Mazaria and Criston Cole, and higher-born people like Daemon and Corlys, who still feel that they've been wronged despite having so much else going for them as well. We have duty versus love, a very old theme in Game of Thrones, dating all the way back to Book 1 of Maester Aemon talking to Jon. There's a lot of that in this one.
Did you say booty versus love?
Booty versus love. Duty versus love, yes. Marrying for love or duty is specifically where this comes up a lot. Viserys, Laena, Alicent, of course, are thrown into the midst of this mostly, but their families as well, the ones pushing them towards it. Rhaenys and Corlys and Otto. Daemon, too, as well, talks to Rhaenyra about the fact that he wasn't able to choose his bride. He was forced to marry Rhea Royce. He didn't have any say in it. Of course, some of the subtext there is that we're not long away from Rhaenyra also having to marry, but that obviously hasn't happened yet, so we'll hold on to that for later when it does happen. So factions are forming. People are starting to team up. People of action are taking action. People who prefer the slow burn, the slow plotting, the methodology are doing their thing. Let's start with Rhaenyra as heir, because despite the passage of time, it doesn't seem like she's being treated much differently. She isn't really being treated like an heir. She's still just pouring wine, and then she makes a suggestion in council, and she kind of gets she gets shut down and kicked out, basically. It's a gentle kicking out, but she's kicked out.
Yeah, Viserys just lets people talk over her. Not only the heir, but a princess. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and he talks over her himself when they have their private dinner, too. She's like, I thought I was making a good suggestion. He's like, you'll learn. He doesn't even let her finish. Like, I thought I had a good idea, Dad. She's like, no. That was rude. And not how you would treat someone that you're raising to make decisions. So, yeah.
I wanted so bad in that moment for her to say, learn what? What can you tell me what it is I was supposed to learn there, right? Like, if he really wanted to learn, he should actually teach her more rather than just put her in her place and hope she gets it. What is she supposed to get that she's not supposed to speak up? Like, that was the implication to me. He needed to tell her what she was supposed to learn, and she maybe needed to ask too, even if only to make him realize that he wasn't teaching her well, or that he had relegated her out of the position she was ostensibly supposed to be in.
That's a good point.
I Also, later on, I wanted so bad when she came back from Dragonstone and he was kind of upset with her, like, you this and a danger and you shouldn't. I wish she had said, you'll learn. Thrown that back in his face.
That would have been fantastic. Oh, man, yeah.
We're talking, you were mentioning how Viserys hasn't really been teaching her anything. Obviously, Rhaenys, as we'll get to, was trying to teach her some things.
Yeah.
The only other person in the episode that actually gave Rhaenyra concrete advice.
Alicent.
No. Alicent too. Otto.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Otto, she's standing there not knowing what to do. No one has guided her for this at all. And Otto really saves, the day for her in that moment. He's trying to push her around. In general, Otto sucks. But he still was like, you should thank him for his leal service.
Teaching
no one has
how
taught
to
her that. So, I appreciated that he at least guided her a little.
It was really meaningful because it shows that Viserys didn't teach her that. No one was teaching her that. Someone had to, ad-lib it for her.
I feel like Alicent would have known to do that, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. Alicent would have. She's very proper and, courtly.
It also did show she was wise enough. She was keen enough to know she couldn't just say, you're no good. You're no good.
Yeah.
Next.
Next.
She knew to not straight up insult him, but she didn't know quite how to proceed appropriately. And he stepped in and helped her with that. But she also knew enough that she would be able to assert herself in this moment. She knew she needed to follow certain etiquettes, but she didn't have to follow all the rules.
Yeah, that was...
And she knew well enough...
Sure we'll talk about this more in a minute.
And she knew well enough that this was very political and that she was, Otto was trying to manipulate there. She is savvy enough to tell that these strings are being pulled.
Yeah.
She understands that there's a game, but she doesn't know some of the details of the
Yes,
the
she can
rules
tell
of
the game is
but-
being played, but yeah, you're right. She isn't fully aware of all the stakes and even all the players and the rules.
What
I wanted
are
to
the
ask
rules?
something.
What are the rules?
I wanted a little dance for you. I wanted to ask a kind of a big question that leads into almost every aspect of this. How many Targaryens are there right now exactly? Are there literally just 3? Is it just Viserys? Oh, 4, I guess. Viserys, Daemon, Rhaenyra, and
Rhaenys.
Rhaenys, yeah.
Yeah, and there's
she's
other
married
part
and-
Targaryens,
Yeah.
technically, because Laena and Laenor are half Targaryen through
Yeah.
Rhaenys.
Okay, yeah.
So
Of course, yeah.
I would count them as well, personally.
Yeah,
Are
their
there
last
any
name
other
is Valyrian,
cousins
but yes, they
or
are.
uncles or anything?
I don't think so.
No, that's it.
That should be it at this
Yeah,
point.
that is it. I'll put a family tree on the screen for everyone, and you'll see for yourself in one.
Yeah, Emma
moment.
didn't have brothers or sisters or anything, and she was half Targaryen. Yeah, there's just
Here's a spoiler-free family tree that I have adapted from Michael Klarfeld, and the people, as you see down here, with pictures. This will help you for all.
It adds it adds a little more weight to the need for Viserys to, get married and have more children, and I guess have a male heir, because all the others are women except for Daemon, I suppose. But maybe they don't trust him to do it. Also,
he hasn't done it on his wife Rhea Royce, so yeah.
Yeah, he's not even trying to have kids with his wife. Yeah.
Yeah, or isn't able. I mean, they've given us a couple pieces of evidence. I feel like I saw it again here. I might be jumping around in our outline, but I wanted to point out that I felt like Rhaenyra questioned it when she's like, "Wait, you're gonna have a child, huh?" Mm-hmm. Like she was asking that. I felt knowingly, like she knows that he can't. I wonder if that's been he's confided that in her somehow. She seemed particularly suspicious of that. And in the council meeting, when she overheard that, she kind of perked up too.
That is an interesting point. I've never thought about that, but if he is someone that has lots of relations, which this kind of suggested that he has, you'd think maybe he'd have a kid by now, a bastard child or something. And the fact that he hasn't, maybe she's picked up on that. It's interesting. I never considered this.
It would even have reinforced his claim to the throne if he had to.
That's true.
Right? It seems like something he would be motivated to do. It seems like he's having sex. It seems like he has a wife. It seems there's a lot of reasons why he could have, should have had a kid and doesn't. And it's been pointed out to us several times. So I don't know how exactly they'll ever make that clear, but it's something I'm starting to believe.
Right. It may be the case or not. I won't say because it would be a spoiler, but it doesn't matter whether it's true or not if Rhaenyra perceives that it might be. Because at this point, she could see that, okay, he has no kids, maybe he can't. Whatever happens later, we'll see. Maybe he will have one or several. But anyway, at this point, clearly there's none. So bringing this back to the Kingsguard selection, these two characters are very related in this sense. It's a point that I mentioned at the beginning, that proving oneself. Rhaenyra sort of proves herself in this moment by being the one to de-escalate all this, being the one to actually get Daemon to back down at Dragonstone. But the point she makes here is the one that sets all that up, which is she says, well, which of these guys has any fighting experience? Which is a great point to make, right? Like, yes, Otto's concerned with the politics, and there is some reason to be aware of the politics when you're choosing Kingsguard knights. They serve as hostages, in a sense, to that family's house. They also there's a favor kind of going back and forth that could be. But Rhaenyra's like, oh, I don't care about that. I want someone who knows how to fight, because, like, who cares if this other stuff if they aren't actually good protectors? It's a pretty good point, right? And it gets down to she keeps bringing things down to their simplest base in a wise way. She simplifies things that have become too lofty, too tainted by politics, things like marriage and shows of force, and just keep it to the basics is kind of her approach, and it seems to work, at least so far. Now, of course, the long-term consequences of Criston Cole as a Kingsguard are yet to be seen. It may not be as simple as it comes out at this point. The guy he's replacing is a really big deal. We'll talk about him some other time, but Ryan Redwine was a really important person.
Can we talk about him at least a little bit right now? Because I had a question.
Yeah, go for it.
How did he die? Is it suspicious?
No,
was he
no.
78-year-old Kingsguard?
They said he was old and sick for a while.
He was the Kingsguard standing next to Jaehaerys at that great council, and he was old there.
Yeah.
They said that he died peacefully in his sleep, which made me wonder.
Well, they said he was ill also, though. Had been ill for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, he was old. He was very old.
But we also are seeing this Maester seems either very incompetent or very unlucky. He is not doing a particularly good job dealing with Viserys' illnesses.
True.
Ailments. And if he was in charge of the King Guards also, then even if he had access to them or their food, I don't know. I don't
think there's anything here, Sean. In this case, but it's good to worry. It's good to keep your suspicions open. But yeah, I don't think in this case he had been Lord Commander for like 40 years. He's very, very up there. It's not suspicious when a man that age dies. So the new guy that replaces him, it's interesting. Yeah, like I said, we'll talk about Ryan some other time. He's got a whole long career. He sort of sets the stage for what Kingsguard should be like. He's like the model Kingsguard that someone like Criston Cole would have grown up idolizing. A lot of these guys would have grown up idolizing him because he was such an amazing man during his time.
That era is Barristan Selmy.
He is this era. In fact, they are compared. Yes, that's a great take, Sean. A great comparison. That is very much who he's compared to, because Barristan was also a Lord Commander and long service, and yeah, still relevant even when he's older. The chessboard thing was really cool for all the selection here in this scene. And what's with the stool? Do you guys have any thoughts on that? They make a point of showing her standing up on that stool to look down over the railing and look down. I didn't know what they were suggesting with that, but I thought it was neat.
My impression was that it was emphasizing that she was young and a small girl, and also that she was engaged and curious and interested. That it every time she'd have to peer over, it kind of I don't know that was the point, but that's what it got across to me, was that she was into this.
I thought that this isn't normally set up for her.
Oh, I like that.
Also, she had to step up to the role, the decision.
Yeah,
that makes sense, Sean. I like that.
I like that a lot.
So, moving on to the Rhaenys section here, Laena, of course, is talking to Viserys, and Rhaenyra sees this, and Rhaenys sees that, and she confronts her with this great question: "Does it bother you?" And they have this very tense but polite exchange, forced politeness, where they're referring to each other by their full titles, yes, Princess Rhaenyra, yes, Princess Rhaenys, but it's a little bickering, but they kind of they're in the same place in a lot of ways. But maybe Rhaenyra doesn't want to admit that it's the same place because no, they didn't bow to you. But Rhaenyra says no, or Rhaenys says it's not really that different. They're still not going to want to swear to you, even though they bowed to you, even though they did all that. He's going to remarry. You know this. It's probably going to be a boy, and everyone's going to expect that boy to overpass you, to take your spot. And that's just how it is. That's the order of things, as you said. That was obviously one of the recurring lines from the trailers, even before the show even aired. So that was meant to be an important moment here.
It's funny that Eve Best addressed this in the behind the scenes, where she talked about the idea that Rhaenys kind of has a vested interest for her own pride, that the patriarchy is holding Rhaenyra down. So she kind of wants this to be the case a little bit deep down. She is looking out for Rhaenyra, but she's also looking out for herself there. But also when she's having this conversation with her where she tells her, hey, you're going to be disinherited, she thinks in her head that she'll be disinherited by her grandkids. It's a little more pointed there than what it ends up being. My
daughter's kids are going to be the ones to take.
Yeah, that's what she's thinking.
Yeah, and Rhaenyra knows that because she's just watching Laena talk to her father, so she's aware. That's definitely a huge undertone in this conversation. It's like some boy. It's no, a boy that comes from your daughter is really what you're saying here. But of course, that doesn't happen. They don't get married, but that doesn't mean a boy won't come along from Alicent instead.
Another, subtext in all this is that I think we all agree, and even the characters in this world seem to agree, that there is a level of inappropriateness for a girl this young to be getting married, yes, right? Yes. And even to the king, it's still this shaky thing that's going on that everyone's I don't know, I guess.
Most of his counselors are ignoring that, but several people aren't, yeah.
Anyway, it shows the extra level of commitment or whatever that Rhaenys has to this, that it maybe she kind of needs to be correct about it.
Yeah.
In the same way that it's kind of more of a personal slight on her if Rhaenyra gets to become queen.
Yeah, and then
if it's they just always pick the men, then it becomes more of a personal slight on her. So it's sort of also as a defense against her, ego or whatever. Yeah. For her daughter to be the one, because it reaffirms that they just et cetera, et cetera.
And it's the duty love theme again, right? Rhaenys is of course I hate it. I don't want to put my daughter through this, but I feel like I have to. Just like I was put through stuff and you're being put through stuff. This isn't a marriage for love. It's a marriage of duty. And this arrangement is also a marriage of duty.
This is a little more than duty and love, though, because this isn't a romantic love. This is the love for her child. And this is levels of morality, not just relationships, love within relationships. This is, in fact, I wanted to bring this up later, but all I could think that time when Corlys was the realm is watching, and he's talking about to see how Viserys responds to Daemon, but the realm is also watching him marry a 12-year-old girl. What kind of message does that send to the people of the realm? That's also bad. They're definitely caught up in their power-hungry little worlds of politicking and not thinking about the morality of what they're doing to the people involved, or the impact it will have on how the people of the land perceive their leaders' moralities.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that speaks to the privilege stuff that as a theme here.
Yeah, and I think they're able to justify it. Like, I think you can tell that Corlys has mixed feelings about this. They linger on him as he watches Laena go off with Viserys, and Rhaenys even says out loud that she is not.
Of course I hate it.
Of course I am.
I'm bothered or whatever.
But I still think that if you're talking about like it's duty versus love, I think there's a part of them that would say, yeah, they're doing this out of love for their daughter because they love her enough to make her queen.
Yeah, and they think they're doing right by her. They don't.
Yeah, I think they do genuinely think that ultimately this is the right thing to do for Laena and for the whole family.
And this is another theme of the episode. Mazaria is the one who puts it into words. She says, "Look, I attach myself to you because your protection liberates me from fear. I can be a whole person or close to a whole person because I'm no longer worried about being enslaved or murdered." That's the same thinking here. If you're more powerful than everyone else, then no one holds power over you. The safest you can be is your safety is tied to your power, to your place in the hierarchy. It's not always true because sometimes it makes you a target, but that's how these power players think. They think the higher you are, the safer you are.
Sometimes it makes you a slave. Was Emma safe?
No, she wasn't.
And Viserys, as we talked about, this is this theme of powerless, that even the king himself, even Viserys, feels like he is a slave to duty, and he is.
The system is the problem here. Yeah. Like, it's not like he has to marry. It's not like we can't justify necessarily him marrying this young girl, but you can see why it's being pushed on him for political reasons, power reasons, and for reasons that might prevent war. So it's like it isn't only the only consideration.
But they have to ignore all these other factors too. Right. It's not the only consideration, but I think they are letting that consideration outweigh more important ones, basically out of greed and selfishness and whatever else.
And again, that speaks to it's another condemnation of the system itself. It's like, well, the system creates these situations where families have to sacrifice their young women to stay relevant.
I don't know if they were intending it, but we see this parallel of Massaria is paired up with the prince of the land, the king's brother, and she's realizing, wait, this isn't very safe.
Yeah.
So Alicent's going to marry the king. Is it really going to be that safe? Was it that safe for Emma? There's a certain level of liberty you'd rather have than safety too.
Yeah.
Which is even what Massaria said. She did this for liberation, not for a position or whatever else. And who knows what this 12-year-old girl wants? No one's asking her. They're just deciding that she wants quote unquote safety, which we know isn't really safety, instead of her liberty. And I don't know. It's frustrating for me to watch all these characters make all these bad decisions. So anyway, we should move on.
And Otto is the cunning one about this. They present this marriage like, look at the political. Look at the power. Look at how this will help the realm. That's not really Viserys' not number one concern. Otto knows the king way better, and he understands what makes him tick and understands how his decision process works. So it's very much knowing your target. Otto doesn't openly say it's a bad idea because it's hard to make that point. It is a good idea other than the creepiness, which from the politics side, Otto doesn't care about that. He's like, yeah, it's like no one can deny this is a prestigious match. Not even Otto, who wants his daughter to be the one instead. He can't deny. So he brings up the duty-love paradigm. It's super clever and dirty. He says, look, it's okay to marry for love. I don't envy you. He's like, you're the king, but I don't envy you because everyone's making you marry for duty, but you could. He's hinting that you could marry for love, and that's what he ends up doing.
It sucks that you can't do what you really want, doesn't it?
Even though you're the king, yeah.
Wait, I can't do what I want, yeah.
As much as awful as Otto,
marry a 15-year-old. Like, especially the king shouldn't be.
It's a real hate the player, not the game moment, or hate the game, not the player, whichever you prefer, because it's a smooth move. It's dirty, it's underhanded, but man, it is clever. He knows exactly what chord to strike. He's playing Viserys like a fiddle there. And because a recurring pattern with Viserys is, he's easygoing, but he does not like to be forced into things. He will get stubborn if he's being pushed into a decision, like he is with Daemon, like he was with the marriage, like he was with Stepstones. Yeah, exactly. Like he doesn't like being forced. And you can talk him into something. You can lead him to it. But if he feels like he's being forced, his hackles will rise and he gets resistant. Otto guides him, herds him, encourages, nudges him in the right direction. And it works where other people are like, we got to do this, king. We got to do this now. Or this is really important now. And that never seems to work. It's only been 2 episodes, but multiple times that route is a dead end. Corlys shows that. Daemon shows that. Yeah, it's great character building because it's consistency of this behavior and how the other people try to manipulate him based on it or don't.
I didn't think about it before, but remember we were thinking about how the Maester was looking at, in the first episode, was looking at Viserys' wound.
Yeah.
And the younger guy suggests a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Maester's like, oh, yeah, that's what we should do. I wonder if that was a similar thing. Like, he knew better than to tell the king to do that. But if someone else brings it up and he goes along with it, then maybe the king will go along with it too.
Yeah.
I wonder if he understands the same thing about the king that Otto does.
I remember how he reacted. He was like, fine. Like, we'll do it. Like, he was just he didn't really have an argument against it. And he was still trying to downplay it. Like, it's just going to go away. And they're like, I don't know about that, king. This thing's like weeping.
But this wasn't the Maester pushing him into it, right?
Right.
This is the Maester letting him see maybe it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. That's a good point. So moving on to Alicent and Rhaenyra and the Sept. Alicent understands this quite well. She does this great job of mending the fences between Rhaenyra and Viserys right before the fences get blown up again by Viserys' handling of the situation by not telling her, not including her in his decision-making process and dropping it all as a surprise. But it sets Alicent up as religious. It shows her more of a believer. She has more faith than perhaps the average, especially noble, would have.
And especially Rhaenyra, who doesn't even apparently know how to pray.
Yeah, I know. That was a very moving moment. She hadn't known how to pray. She's like, no, just say what's on your mind. Just spill your guts, and just that's what the mother would want.
I really didn't know how I thought Rhaenyra was going to react to that conversation, to be honest, just because, like, if you're that old and you don't know how to pray, maybe there's a reason you've never been interested in that. But Alicent, I think, was genuine that she wanted to help Rhaenyra get her emotions out, and she genuinely thought this was a good way to do that, and she was right.
More example of her not being educated in certain things, I guess. No one even taught her how to pray properly.
Yeah, I guess her mother, maybe her mother wasn't religious either.
It might be also another demonstration, kind of like the not knowing how to handle the Kingsguard selection, that she just hasn't been interested in, much less prepared for, all these roles, right?
Yeah,
it's just another example of how she was the girl. She's not going to be queen, and she didn't care about it. She wanted to ride her dragon and eat cake, but now she kind of has to. So, okay, she'll learn how to pray. She'll learn the court procedures for the Kingsguard and so on.
Yeah, and there's Shea detected a little clue here in the intro sequence. The marker for Alicent actually has a 7-pointed star to indicate who she is here in the moment there.
It's hard for me to find.
I really loved the scenery in this one with all the candles and everything and the statue. I assume that's the mother.
There it is.
And yeah, it's kind of hard to see here. Shay's got it on screen now.
I'm zooming it in now. There you go. Now you can
see. So you can see the 7-pointed star there.
So which is really emphasizing, and we've seen in a preview of older Alicent, one of her outfits is a very severe gown with the 7-pointed star like necklace on, which really makes me think that she's gonna really get very religious.
Yeah, that could show a bit of a dichotomy or maybe some friction between her beliefs and Valyrian culture and Valyrian beliefs, things like the prophecy, maybe other dreams, things like that. So, that's perhaps something to keep an eye on for later. So Viserys and Alicent in private, even as she's mending bridges, things are out of control, sending her towards a confrontation with her best friend. But Alicent comes off as very genuine here, I think. I know obviously her father is pushing her towards this, but her sympathy seems completely real and not fake at all. The dropped dragon. This is a really big deal. I think there's a huge amount of symbolism here. We talked last time about how the symbolism of the wound on his back that we just discussed was evidence of how he doesn't take care of problems and how his reign is also festering. He has this finger that's got this horrible wound that he has treated with maggot therapy. By the way, maggot therapy is still used in modern times. And he can't hold the stone dragon. His grip on the realm, his grip on his own house of the dragon, he drops a stone dragon. He can't hold on to it anymore. It's very symbolic of his losing his grip on everything, his family and the realm. But Alicent fixes it. She presents him with a fixed version of it. This is also symbolic of how she's the one to solve the problems, to heal him, to help heal the family. It's really well done. What did y'all? Shay, we'll start with you because I know you discussed this a little bit with Joe Magician on the stream that you did with him immediately after the episode. The stone dragon.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was very significant considering you then see Alicent is going to marry Viserys and give him more replacement dragons to replace the ones
Birthing
that he's
dragons from stone.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was very on the nose.
Yeah.
Very, very much so. But also, I beyond the symbolism of it, it's significant to me in what it says about Alicent as a political player or as a person in general, because I think that was Alicent's decision to fix the dragon. But we had a little debate in Joe Magician's stream where he thought that perhaps it was because Alicent goes and talks to Otto after the meetings and she told Otto about this and Otto suggested it. I like to give Alicent more credit. I haven't really seen Otto give Alicent a lot of guidance there, so I think that was just her being genuinely kind, and it was also very smart, but I think she just was being nice.
I think so too. I think she saw it as something that would be meaningful to him. She's in touch with his feelings. They've hung out together. She's got a sense of what he cares about. She knew it would be a gesture that was well received. It was. He was very moved by it. And yeah, so I agree. I think it was all her. What do you think, Sean?
I think so too. I had a couple of thoughts too that it was, I don't know, sort of symbolic. He kind of dropped the ball, dropped the dragon, and broke the splinter, cracked the house of the dragon or whatever. And she put it back together. I had another thought. I don't know if this is maybe slightly tinfoily, but I suspect that they had already been intimate before he announced the marriage.
Some other people on Twitter think that too. I don't agree, but other people think that as well. So you're not alone.
Yeah, I'm not confident, but one thought I had was when it turned out to be Otto knocked on the door when they were sitting there chatting, he seemed almost, I don't know, embarrassed, he felt like he needed to straighten himself up. It seemed like he fixed his pants.
See, that's because he was moved by her gesture of giving her the dragon. That's what had gotten him into that state in the first place. Yeah, and there wasn't a cut there.
Yeah, I think it was an emotional intimacy that they reached and not a sexual intimacy.
He had to become the king again.
I don't necessarily think it was, but it's just one thing that made me consider it too, that she gave him a gift. That dragon is her giving him a gift. She might have already given him some other gift. And also, how long was she wearing that same dress?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I saw people point out.
I don't think that's relevant at all. I noticed that it's the same dress, but I don't think that's relevant because her wearing the same dress doesn't mean anything. I mean, she wouldn't. What does that? What does that suggest?
It doesn't necessarily mean anything that she was wearing the same clothes she had the day before.
Yeah, but there's lots of times we've seen that. Lots of other scenes. That doesn't mean it doesn't indicate someone staying in someone else's bed.
I'm not saying this means. I'm not saying that this is proof. I'm saying these are things that made me consider it.
Yeah.
I feel like there might have been some other times where we've seen people wear the same thing twice, but I don't think it's normal. And they easily could have had her wear a different dress, but they didn't. It might just go back to that's her mother's dress, and that's what Otto told her to wear, so she's doing it. But it seems like her mother would have more than one dress. I don't know.
I mean, she did wear multiple dresses in the episode. Yeah. It was just that one scene she had the blue one on twice.
I sort of stopped saying this might be a little tinfoily. Once again, it's the type of thing I don't know how they could ever clarify it. How could they ever make this be? How do they tell us?
Yeah, that's kind of
be some conversation next episode where she tells Rhaenyra.
We also have to remember that this is a real taboo. If she gets pregnant before they're married, that's a big deal. So I really there's a lot of reasons why they wouldn't do it, even if neither of them seem horny, but, she's a young girl who's very prim and proper, and he's still mourning. I just don't see it.
And by that same token, that's the reason why he wants to get married so quick. He said by the end of this spring.
Now, that's why they want him to get married.
Yeah, I think
he doesn't want to get married.
Yeah, I think he wants to stop being hounded. So he's like, let's do this then.
He's just been convinced that it's necessary. Yeah. The moment of the announcement is pretty brutal because. One thing he could have told Corlys in private it wasn't going to be. That's what he probably should have done. He's been like, look, we're not going to pick your daughter. I don't want to embarrass you in front of everybody. Because Corlys gets ready. He's all sits forward. He's like, all right, here it comes. And he also doesn't tell Rhaenyra. And this was even more brutal on a personal level because he basically gets her buy-in on remarrying. And so she's like, I'm for it. Go ahead and get remarried, but doesn't tell her who. But she thinks she's signing off on Lena. She thinks she's signing off on him marrying Lena Velaryon because that's what's been presented to everyone.
Not her best friend.
Not her best friend. She didn't see Alicent coming at all until that great moment where they look at her, and then Rhaenyra turns. It's one of the great acting moments where she turns and looks at Alicent when she realizes what's happening. And
she's like, why are you in this meeting?
Yeah, she's like, wait, why are you even here? And like, oh, that's why. So Corlys walks out, and then Rhaenyra walks out, and both of those walkouts could have been avoided with a little, like, let me take you aside and talk to you in private. So
yeah, which is where it's clear that Otto is manipulating things because he wants to alienate Corlys, and he wants
Otto was smirking.
Yeah, he's happy to do that, even though it's not really good for Viserys or the realm long term. He's not being savvy there because they really shouldn't alienate the Master of Ships and House Velaryon. Like, they don't want that.
Yeah.
It's another indicator to me of several things. One, that Viserys didn't think about this or plan this very well. So he's just not a particularly good leader. None of them seem to be particularly good communicators. There's a million opportunities every one of these characters had to make this go more smoothly or to stop it from happening altogether or whatever it is. But it's also, I think, interesting to note that none of them are really playing the Game of Thrones very well. Right? They like, think about someone like a Viserys or a Littlefinger or, eventually even Sansa. Think about the idea that for months, we don't know exactly how things have gone, but 6 months have passed and Alicent and Viserys seem to be meeting somewhat regularly, right? To the point he's decided to marry her, and Rhaenyra, her best friend, isn't aware of these meetings. Corlys, who's trying to court his daughter, the king, isn't aware of these meetings. Does no one have any kind of
Master of Whispers in play? Remember
one thought there is that it is possible that Corlys and Rhaenys were aware of these meetings, and that's why they came to push Lena's claim, because they knew that they were going to miss out otherwise.
Yeah, like they realized Otto got the jump on them, which he did. He sent Alicent the day Emma died. I mean, it was like he was like, all right, let's get on this now, because like Rhaenys said, someone's daughter is going to marry Viserys. It may as well be ours, and that's also what Otto was thinking. But he just got the jump on them, and his daughter was a better match. Frankly, they get along. I mean, even though
it is possible that they knew and were working against it, but they didn't present that to us really in the show at all.
Right, that's true.
He didn't seem to direct any anger towards Otto over this decision, so it makes me think he was just naive.
Yeah.
And all of them are a little naive about how to play the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The value of information in these sort of political workings.
Yeah, I think if Corlys and Rhaenys knew about the Alicent meetings, you might think that they would have said something to discourage it in some way. They might have had some argument for why she wasn't a valid marriage opportunity, but maybe they just didn't have a good argument against it. Also,
Corlys is sort of like brash, emotional storm out isn't a very good political play, or doesn't show that he was prepared for this in any way. And maybe a little bit of a tangent, but he's just kind of disappointed me as a character, not in necessarily how they're presenting him, but like his decisions or his wisdom or whatever. I thought he was going to be a little bit more of like a hero leader type, and I'm a little bit more like, I don't know about this guy. He seems like an arrogant,
he's super ambitious,
emotional, reactive, ambitious guy who does, I don't know. Anyway, the idea that, he or Kriston get extra credit for having seen real combat, I want to give more credit to Viserys for having stopped real combat. I think.
Yeah, I still think that's a virtue of his. Yeah, when he says that to Corlys, that's a good line of his where he says, it's my job to avoid war until it's unavoidable, which that's like, yeah, maybe he's not good at it, but that value, as a value, I agree with it, right? So that's really important. Yeah, so he managed this very poorly. Now, what about Alicent's reaction? I read it as ashamed, because she knew, like, she sees her friend's reaction and not surprised, like she knew it was coming. But I think some people thought Alicent also didn't know that announcement would be made. I think, Ashay, you saw it the same way as me?
Originally, but I think I thought originally that maybe she didn't know, but I think ultimately she had to have a feeling, because I think Viserys would have asked her before announcing this at the very least, and then when she's invited to the small council meeting, even if they don't say, hey, we're going to announce it there, she should figure it out.
They didn't bring her in there. He didn't invite her there to tell her no, to be like, I'm not marrying you, by the way, but I just wanted you to be here for it.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was just, Alicent was very afraid to bring this up to Rhaenyra, and so she made a very flawed decision to not tell her.
But
she was probably asked not to tell her.
Viserys
No.
Oh.
He asked not to tell her about the meetings, but at the point when they say we're gonna get married, Alicent should have said to Viserys, okay, but we need to tell Rhaenyra private. There's some conversation that should have had there.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
And I think she was maybe she was told again not to say it, but in my opinion, she was just scared to bring it up.
Yeah.
She knew that Rhaenyra would be mad. I don't think that makes someone two-faced. I don't think that makes someone terrible.
But I do think agency here, yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that Rhaenyra is just not going to forgive her easily. Like, she might try to forgive her in the next coming episodes, but she's in the back of her mind going to be thinking, like a lot of fans are, like, she's a snake. I can't trust her.
Yeah.
I think for some of the reasons you said that she didn't. Well, I mean, I think she probably pieced it together in his mind, but I don't think there was an active conversation where he told her. Because if he wouldn't even tell his own wife, we're about to kill you to save the baby, why would he tell her they're getting married?
That's
and since I do think she would have told Rhaenyra. Like, I think that probably as that meeting was unfolding, she was realizing.
Yeah, she's like, why am I in the small council meeting?
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's continue on this line of thinking with our mid-roll here. I'll take a few questions and take care of a few random details. Laura Brondos asks, is Alicent ambitious at this point? Right? Is she already seeing... is she just a little seduced by the idea of being queen? Or is that purely her father? Or something she's going to grow into later, maybe? I'm not sure. I don't see any overt signs of ambition. But it might be the same kind of thing where she's seeking protection, like Mazzari, where she's like, well, maybe this is the safest thing for me. She doesn't seem like a big fan of her own father, so she might prefer a father figure like her husband, which is a weird thing to conceptualize. But Viserys treats her better than her own dad does at this point, so far.
I really like the idea that when Rhaenyra is bemoaning to Alicent, like, oh, my father just treats me like a little girl, there's the idea that Alicent in her head is thinking, oh, I wish my father treated me like a little girl. He treats me like a grown woman. This is not all it's cracked up to be, Rhaenyra. Yeah. And so I just feel for Alicent, and no, I don't think that she's motivated by ambition, but I do think she'll begin to realize, like, oh, I need to hold on to this power with everything I have, or I might get killed. Like, I think she's going to be motivated by fear, just like Mazzaria brought up. I think that is definitely a great through point throughout the whole episode.
I think that Alicent may, by observing her father or maybe the other people around her, the gear in her brain to recognize the ambitious play is there. But that doesn't mean she is ambitious. But it might make her move toward ambition more quickly once she's in this position and has those gears turning in her brain.
Once she maybe learns more about politics and where the threats are coming from to her family, to her position, that may change. That'll grow into some of these things. Politics. Power politics changes everyone, right? Like
it's a pretty common and theme that seems to hold true through life, through history, that power corrupts. And I'm sure at least part of that is once you have a little power, you don't want to let it go. And you usually use that little bit of power you have to get a little bit more. And the more you do that, the less you want to let it go, the more you have to lose by letting it go. And it's a trap that you fall into, I guess,
Yeah. George F. Sends a message on Patreon, says, is the marriage to Alicent more insulting to House Valyrian because Otto is the second son? That is possible. Yeah, I think it might be. I think especially it's been shown that Corlys is quite proud. He didn't take the rejection well. He didn't take the not moving on the Stepstones well. So yeah, he kind of expects to get what he wants. He has some pretty good reasons for wanting action in the Stepstones, but he doesn't deserve to marry his daughter to marry the king, which that's one of the things probably you didn't like about him, Sean, I'm guessing, that he felt entitled to that. There's a maybe slightly confusing line when he's talking to Daemon at the end that George wanted me to clarify. He says, when Daemon says, I wasn't aware you had a king for a brother, the question was, well, we didn't know Corlys had a king for a brother? Well, this is a snide remark. Corlys is trying to compare himself to Daemon, and Daemon is rejecting this. He's like, no, we're not that similar. He's like, I wasn't aware you had a king for a brother. He's like trying to say we're cut from the same, because he said we're cut from the same cloth. He's like, I wasn't aware you had a king for a brother. So he's actually trying to keep that distance. Because at first Corlys's line of inquiry is a little insulting to Daemon. His pride is tweaked by that, and he's like pushing back. He's like, you can't talk about my brother like that. Only I can, you know.
Daemon, I don't know, twisted on him a little bit too. When he's pointing out to whatever extent they're similar, Daemon presents that as, are you here to remind me of how lowborn I am? You know, it's kind of implying that Otto, the Corlys is lowborn.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. In fact, like we're both men of action. We go at it. We jabber jaw. We tit for tat. So,
I want to point out real quick that clearly it matters to the people in power here. I'm kind of agreeing that it probably is more of a slight to House Valyrian because Otto's second son, whether it should be or not. Just think about how they presented Criston Cole, the son of the steward of
Blackhaven. Yeah, that's right.
They wouldn't even give the father a name, you know.
Aaron Ginsberg says, what sept were they praying in? Maegor burned the one on Visenya's Hill, and Baelor isn't alive yet. Yeah, okay, so it's an unnamed sept, but it is absolutely in canon, book canon. There was a grand sept built by the Faith. The Faith paid for it. The High Septon paid for it. That was built before the one that Maegor built, or burned, rather. So, of course, later, Baelor later comes along much later, and Baelor's sept is built. But there was a grand sept. Here it is. There's the picture. That is from book canon as well. So, this was when Aegon adopted the Faith. The High Septon was all about it. They're like, yeah, you should. And so they were like, you need a big church, Aegon. And he's like, well, I don't know if I have the money for that. Like, well, we got you covered. We'll pay for it, but put it in a prominent location. And well, that looks pretty prominent to me. So yeah, that's the explanation for that. Thanks for the question, Aaron Ginsberg. Very good, deep cut question there. A great example to me of how this story mixes the epic with the mundane. Otto and Alicent, right before he leaves for Dragonstone, we have this moment. He complains. He's dressed up in his armor. He's got all his garb. There's the fireplace, all the decorations. Criston Cole shows up, and it's about to be this big showdown. But they just talk about her biting her nails, right? Just how, like, you're tearing yourself apart. And it's like, yeah, because you put all this pressure on me and putting me in this position of intrigue, and I'm 15. And like Ashaya said, can I just be a little girl for a while, maybe? And the way she's looking at him is very telling. She is not giving him a happy face. She is like, I am mad at you, or I hate you, or something like that.
You know, another effect of the position she's being put in here is she's sort of losing her confidant, right? Like, if she's courting her best friend's father, and her best friend is the person that she talks to about things. Like, what if your confidant, what if the person you had to talk about things was the king, right? Like, your personal problems would seem so trivial. You don't have, I don't know. It's so awkward in so many ways for her to be put in this position.
The weight of that relationship. Yeah. Like, what do you do as Alicent? Like, what move could she make? You know, like,
assuming you had no stresses or troubles in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know that her and her best friend probably gossip about boys have crushes on, right? Criston Cole or whatever. Was she supposed to tell the king about her crushes now? Like, yeah.
So Frozen Whirlpool sends a super chat, says Daemon said low standing as in held in low regard. Yeah, of course not low born. That's not what you meant to say, Sean. Yeah. But yeah, like his status was dropping like a rock. Like, lots of failures and setbacks and people coming in front of him in the line of succession or poised to have children that will jump in front of him in the line of succession, etc. Yeah, let's talk about the Dragonstone scene. Starting at the end of it, we see the example of what I talked about at the beginning, her being a bit of a rogue princess. She goes away without her father's permission, but solves the problem quite well, which maybe suggests she was right about the Stepstones. Maybe had they taken her advice on the Stepstone, maybe it wouldn't have gotten so out of hand. If they showed force, like, oh, wow, dragons, they do have that impact. People kind of forget how intimidating they are. Like, maybe Otto did kind of not think that through all the way. Who knows what was on his mind, but it certainly changed his tack at the time when it happened.
And pretty much everyone with him also.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Everyone was like, they pulled their swords out and then they're like,
maybe you fly dragons over the Stepstones and some admiral or some prince is like, whatever. But the average sailor might be like, I got to go back home now.
Yeah, they're not, their morale drops a step or 12. Yeah, they're like, yikes, we got to face that. They're going to make us fight that? I don't know about this. We had it easy before. We were picking off pirates. Now we got to pick off dragon riders? Are you kidding me? That's a lot tougher job. So yeah, earlier we talked.
Like,
okay, go ahead.
A little bit of a tangent, but in the same way that even the king's position seems precarious. He kind of has to make these decisions to maintain his allies, to not start wars, to prevent dissent within the ranks. Well, that's true of other people too. Some pirate king, somewhere else would also have to deal with those issues among his followers when a dragon shows up as a show of force.
Yeah, you're right. No matter who your military force is, morale is going to play a huge role in the readiness and effectiveness of your fighting force, no matter whether it's an official army, a group of mercenaries, or a bunch of pirates, no matter who they are. The group morale is huge. So, in kind of typical Viserys fashion, he sort of backs down, right? She kind of explains her position and she's, look, I was right. And he kind of has to admit she was right. And he's like, yeah, okay. And he's like, look, she doesn't say it, but she's like, look, I got to do things. If I want to be your heir and earn my place and be respected, I got to do stuff. Kind of like Daemon has to do stuff to not just be attorney knight like Kristen Cole isn't. Like the one guy who has real fighting experience. Like, you guys are all green. Like Rhaenyra understands this. Some of the others are kind of jumping the gun. But she's like, look, I gotta just involve me in the process here. Let me do this. It wasn't that dangerous. My uncle's not gonna kill me.
Viserys will learn.
He'll learn. You're right. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. So yeah, Otto just like hammers Daemon, just lays into him with the insults, really heavy-handed. And I understand why y'all are like, what's his angle here? This is because I think it's just it's pure pride personally. Like he is letting go of his normal like cautious approach. He just really hates Daemon and is tired of him and wants to seize the opportunity to push him back a peg, not realizing that Daemon can push back on him.
I will say when Otto said goodbye to Alicent before he went to do that, there was a slight tone there to me that
of
he
danger?
was that he was he knew that he was facing some danger, that this could be the last time he spoke with her.
And they have to be cautious not to bring too many men. Then it does look like they're preparing for a fight.
Yeah.
That's part of his like choosing the right number of men is relevant as well.
By the way, in that dragon scene, I thought it was so interesting that the dragon keepers brought like a brazzor for the egg.
How cool is that? That was really neat.
That was just interesting.
That was really cool. They were just ready to put that thing back in. Like, it needs to continue incubating. Like, it needs to be in the heat. Keep it. It needs to be treated properly.
Bringing Kristen Cole was a decent move too, because it's like a win-win. Like either this new guy gets some decent experience, or this new guy was just some dude anyway. We're not upsetting some big house by killing off their oldest son or whatever.
That's a good point.
That's
He's
true.
maybe more expendable and needs to prove himself too. That's a good point. Like that's the theme of the episode, is proving oneself. But Harold Westerling is really reflects the moment well when Otto's just laying into Daemon, and Westerling kind of looks down like he's a little ashamed of this. He's like, this is not how I would do this. But Kristen Cole's here for it. He's like, yeah, I knocked you off your horse. He's ready. They're all ready to go. But and Otto realizes he's gone too far, and he's the one who provoked all this, but he's like kind of passes the buck like, sheathe your effing steel. It's a great line because he's so commanding when he wants to be. It's really good. He's so good at this. He's a great.
Why'd you even draw your sword?
Yeah, he's like, you fools. I didn't tell you to do that. It's like, you kind of did. You didn't, but you kind of did. And the dragons were so cool. Like, we already went over our dragon moments, but just the fog and the sun and the long, narrow wall, the way Syrax positioned herself on either like part of the railing, and Long Boy stretching his neck out, looking all intimidating. And then his kind of wariness at Syrax being above him. Like, it's the way I look at, like, when we have fish in our aquariums, and then when one fish is like swimming above the other fish, it's like they're wary, like it's like you have positions, like you have the high ground, except it's not ground, it's the high water. Yeah.
You have the high water.
Yeah, so.
I had another thought too when, Syrax is Rhaenyra's dragon, right? Landed on the bridge. I almost expected some crumbling, from the bridge. Can his bridge even hold this huge dragon? But I was reminded that Dragonstone had some mystical elements in its creation.
Yeah,
right. It's not standard stonework. It's the
fused stone,
blood magic or whatever was used to create Dragonstone. So it makes sense that it would be extra strong to support a big dragon landing on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, that was really cool. The way the two dragons were the bookends and the two armies were in the middle, and then Rhaenyra in the center of it. You notice too how Rhaenyra, Daemon tosses the egg at her, she catches it. And then she kind of looks down at it, and then she smiles. She has like a genuine, like, hey, I did it.
Yeah.
Took care of this problem. Like, she was proud of herself. And rightfully so. It was well done. She confronted him. She was brave. She called him out on his bullshit, She, like, called his bluff, basically. It was effective. And then then we go to Mysaria, and she calls him out, too. He's called out 3 times in short succession. Once by Otto, not very effectively. By Rhaenyra, very effectively. Then Mysaria, also somewhat effectively. What were you going to say, Sean?
I just wanted to point out that I thought the imagery of the bridge and Dragonstone and everything, it was interesting how it was sort of clouded, foggy, smoky. The sun was kind of, I couldn't decide if that had some symbolic meaning or just like give it a more unique aesthetic, or if maybe it's supposed to be, shrouded in fog on, its ocean location, or I don't know. I just thought a lot about that president. It made it memorable, if nothing else.
They talk a little bit about that in the behind the scenes, the house that the dragons built featurette, just about what they did to make that happen, and they put thought into it.
Cool.
So Mysaria raises even further some of the crucial issues of this episode. We've kind of discussed them off and on through here, but let's zoom in on these particular things. Privilege is part of it. Daemon has the privilege. He could steal a castle, steal an egg, all these provocations, all these lies, and he doesn't really suffer at all for it. Like, there's no real consequence for him here. And that's kind of what he expected. He knows that's what he gets by being the brother of the king, and he knows who his brother is, and he knows that his brother lets him get away with this stuff. It's a bit funny to break down. This really is just a tantrum, isn't it? All this was just to get his brother to come visit him, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. That is basically what it is. He's just being very petulant, and he wants his brother's love and attention.
And it's funny because Corlys later is like trying to get him to see that he's just being a petulant boy, and he's like, look, why don't you go prove yourself against some real enemies? But he can't come out and say it that way because Daemon's very touchy. Like, he's very proud, and you got to talk to him just right, like Rhaenyra showed that it can be done.
By the way, that was almost a lesson Corlys learned from Viserys. When Viserys was telling him, like, look, here's all the weaknesses that you're showing right now, and Viserys is like, okay, well, what's your plan? Right? It's like, oh, well, marry my kid. I don't know if marrying his 12-year-old daughter fixes any of those problems, actually.
For sure.
Pretext for presenting the marriage.
That was the most BS argument for sure. I rolled my eyes. I was like, okay, what's Corlys' plan going to be? What's he going to say? First, you got to marry my daughter. I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's like the point Lord Strong made earlier. He's like, that guy's still your vassal, even if you don't marry his daughter. Like, the enemies of the throne are aware the sea snake is your vassal, whether you're married to him or not. They still have to take his fleet into account no matter what happens. It's not like just marrying him makes him more of a threat. Not really. He's still a dangerous guy with a lot of money and ships, and who's on the side of the king, even if he's kind of on the outs. So yeah, you're right. It wasn't a great argument, but Viserys is, maybe he's influenced by that sort of thing. I think they thought it would work, and it almost did.
Yeah.
But Corlys also feel like maybe learned, I don't know if I'm giving her too much credit, but he might have learned a lesson that this plan you're presenting to Viserys to marry his daughter didn't actually address all the issues. Yeah. So when he goes to Daemon, and Daemon's like, okay, well, what do you think I should do here? He had this will address your issues. You will get to prove yourself in battle. You will gain more following. You will, et cetera, if you go with me to fight in the Stepstones, which also happens to be good for the realm. This is a big game from everyone. And I'm pretty sure Daemon's going to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
And so Daemon doesn't realize the danger he's putting other people in. Just like Viserys has the privilege to sit around doing his models all day while the realm is kind of mismanaged and other people are doing their things and the Stepstones is getting out of hand and all that. Daemon doesn't see... He's a little arrogant about his bubble of protection. He thinks it extends to everyone around him, including Mysaria. Mysaria's like, no, it does not. It's you only. You're the only one safe in your little bubble here because you're a Targaryen. he's very naive to think that applies to other people. Think about the concept, the real world concept of like a whipping boy, where the idea is you have someone important, a royal blooded person that law and behavior and
justice,
they don't allow the physical harm to come to the prince or the princess because of the laws. No one has the authority to do that. Not even because no one can touch the royal person. Whatever laws they have in place that make them untouchable. So you have a stand-in that gets beaten instead. And the reason this works is that you have a boy and you take that boy's friend. And this little boy doesn't want his friend being beaten. He doesn't want himself being beaten either. But since that's not an option, and we're going to actually probably see this later in this story, in maybe season 2 or season 3, an example of this that comes along. But there's one I can point to you in another movie that isn't about a child. A lot of you have probably seen the movie Braveheart. Remember what the king does to his gay son's lover? He shoves him out a window and kills him. He didn't punish his son for having a gay lover or for not being a good prince. He killed his friend as a way of punishing him. And that's exactly what could happen here. Mazzari could be killed as a punishment for Daemon. Yeah. Yeah.
It seems like none of the parents should want any of the children to be beaten. I don't know, crazy me. They should reevaluate some of their system in the first place.
Exactly.
Whipping boy.
But, on the subject of whipping boys, that is kind of an interesting exercise in empathy for royal people to go through. It could be a genuinely decent learning moment, an important, crucial learning moment that if your child does not want their whipping boy or girl whipped, then that's a good sign for them being empathetic towards others.
And if your boy wants his friend whipped, you've got a Joffrey.
It's a good arbiter.
Watch out for that kid. The one who's like, he acts up because he wants to see the whipping boy get punished. Yikes.
I wanted to point out that moment when Daemon and Massaria talk.
Yeah.
There was a great little bit of symbolism there. What did he do when he came in?
He hugged her and then took all his weapons off.
He was disarmed.
He was disarmed,
Disarmed him.
Does anyone else think his dagger looks like a microphone? The hilt of it, like it's got this broad like tip at the end. It totally looks like a microphone to me. I need him to drop it so he can have a mic drop moment.
He needs 2 turntables.
So it's an interesting change from Mazzari. We won't get too deep into this because we're not sure what they're going with it and we're not trying to deal with spoilers. But in Fire and Blood, she really does get pregnant and loses the child. There's the microphone. Ashaya's got it. See what I mean? It totally looks like a microphone. Valyrian steel microphone.
Netted metal material.
Yeah. It looks like, I guess it scales, right?
Yeah,
it scales probably, but...
Yeah,
I see.
One table and a microphone.
I see microphone. Yeah, yeah. He holds it up to side. He holds it to Caraxi. He's like, it's like, oh my god, that's super loud. So Mazzaria, So in the book, she does have a child. Or doesn't have a child. Gets pregnant and loses it, and that's sets up future events like some anger from her potentially.
That's the story we hear in the book.
Yeah, so it's possible the histories are wrong or it's been changed.
A story we hear in a book,
it's a story we hear in the book.
I haven't read the book, but from what I understand, the book is told from different perspectives, and all the perspectives don't have the same facts, which I think is a really great
although I don't
technique for storytelling.
I don't think this one has alternate versions.
No, there's no alternate version, but
it still could be wrong,
the point could be wrong, absolutely.
Because if the source didn't realize Daemon was lying, maybe that story never got out that Daemon was lying about it.
Yeah.
And they were just like, oh, she must have lost the child.
Yeah, she had a child. Yeah.
That's just a conclusion from, she never had the kid, must have lost it. Yeah.
So I think it's perfectly reasonable. And again, with Fire and Blood, George has not had to tie himself to any of these stories. So he really can just decide whenever he wants to go any way. I really feel strongly that for a lot of this, he has not decided. There is actually zero true telling for a lot of these events.
Yeah. True that. True telling that.
Don't let George Bush get involved.
And we know, and we know it's not going to be a plot point later because she says to Daemon she can't have children. She made sure that she'll never have children. So that it's not, unless she's lying, which seems very unlikely. It'd be a hard thing to get away with, given he's sleeping with him regularly. So that's really important. And of course, we've already talked about her great take on fear and needing protection to be liberated, and how it's a very real world concept. You do sometimes have to sacrifice a little bit of freedom to actually be liberated, to be protected from the dangers out there, because there's true freedom, but true freedom is you have the freedom to die of exposure and be eaten by wild animals.
Because a true freedom might be cold.
Yeah.
I really like that they had Mizaria decide to, whatever the medieval,
be child free or whatever.
Yeah, whatever, get her tubes tied, whatever they do for that.
That works.
I'm sure that it's some terrible experience that she went through, but that's how much she did not want to have children, and it makes sense as like a sex worker who works in the brothel,
or someone who was enslaved. Apparently,
yeah,
she wouldn't want to have like
there's
her.
many reasons why she would feel strongly about that, and I just appreciate that perspective with the context of having seen Aemma in episode 1 and her childbirth. It just and I appreciate just not seeing a miscarriage. Like this is just so much more interesting and refreshing and different and all that.
Yeah, it really is. I totally agree, and it's a great job by the showrunners, the writers, of bringing these like very personal human stories and making them part of the big narrative, the main narrative, and how it affects it in major ways. In compelling ways and understandable ways. Like, you can't understand what it would be like to be faced with the dragons and the prophecies, but yeah, not wanting to have children born into slavery. Yeah, I get that, not on a personal level, but intellectually, of course, I wouldn't want that either. Dro the Gooner sends a super chat, says, in-laws in European royalty often married each other, i.e. King's brother marries the Queen's sister. Could Sir Otto also be trying to arrange a marriage between his son and Rhaenyra? We speculated about this a little bit as well, because they changed the age of his son who was in the joust, Gwaine Hightower. They made him his eldest son. We don't know if Gwaine Hightower in the show is married, but if he's not, absolutely he might try to marry her to Rhaenyra. The question of Rhaenyra's marriage is a huge open one. She's not going to remain unmarried. They're going to force her to get married, and that's a small spoiler there, but it's pretty obvious that's going to happen. And it isn't even really been revealed to this point in the show that
it seems obvious to me that she's going to get married.
What?
It seems obvious to me that she's going to get married to Kristen Cole.
Yeah, of course.
Made in heaven.
Everybody marries Kingsguard knights, and that always goes really well. Yeah, so of course, yeah.
Otto's oldest son ought to get married to Corlys's oldest daughter. Seems like
the 12-year-old.
All the arguments they were making about like tying alliances and strengthening a realm, seems like they all apply there.
For Terra Incognita, who asks how many kids does Otto have, we don't know what it is in the Hot D canon currently. He had multiple sons and a daughter, Alicent, in Fire and Blood, but there's a House of the Dragon Guide.com that you can go to, and they have a family tree, and they do have Otto, Alicent, and Gwaine, but they clearly said eldest son, which implies there are other sons that are not on that family tree.
It's got to be at least one more
So
son,
I wouldn't take the House of the Dragon Guide as being infallible.
Is that an HBO?
It's an HBO resource. Yes, that is an official site. I recommend using. I've tried to use it on Firefox, and it always makes my computer have trouble. I have to use Chrome for it. So, anyways, just be aware. But it's pretty cool. You get to take a look at all the different marble ball things for the small council table. There's a family tree that won't be spoilery for anyone. There's a map of Westeros that only has 2 locations noted, but I'll be checking it every week.
Nice.
Do Corlys and Rhaenys only have 2 daughters?
They have a son and a daughter.
They have a son and a daughter. Lena and Laenor.
Yeah. The 2. Remember at the tourney, there were 2 little kids that were holding each other. Yeah, boy and a girl.
Yeah. So you have. I forgot. Yeah, we have seen him. I actually forgot that.
You've seen him, and he was really into the fighting, and Lena was a little scared, but they were both excited.
So probably less of an age gap between that young boy and Rhaenyra than there is between Alicent and Viserys, right?
You're not wrong, and that is a great age, both of them are unmarried, and so all they were talking about how great a marriage Lena would be. Well, someone's gonna marry her. She's still a great marriage. She's still a great political power move for somebody.
And who's the eligible Valyrian bachelor son gonna marry too. Yes, too important.
It adds to my frustration that there are other options besides this incredible age disparity. It's an inappropriately young girl being married. Like, they have other options that they're not considering, and primarily because they are also sexist, because they don't want it to be a woman to be queen. And like, they make up with their sexism by pedophilia. Like, I don't know, maybe that's too extreme.
Well, they don't. Yeah, I mean, we can. I mean, I'm fine with us calling it that. They don't even in world consider that pedophilia. Maybe. I mean, obviously they probably should, but they're not like, oh, I'm engaging in pedophilia here. They're not like I should feel guilty about what I'm doing. I don't even know if they think that way.
Well, they do
probably
feel
should.
guilty about what they're doing.
Right.
Maybe they don't
Viserys
push
felt
when they're
weird.
12, when she's 12, but like Alicent's 15.
He doesn't
not
really
as
seem
much.
to have any mixed feelings about her age really at all.
I had the thought that like maybe setting up the scene with Viserys and the 12-year-old would be so awful that we might be more acceptant of Viserys with the 17 or 18-year-old. But she's also 15.
Yeah,
well, the actress isn't. Like the actress playing Lena really
better.
is about 12. Emily Carey's like 20 or 21. So
it's
we're a little bit fooled by the actual human beings in play here.
I had the funny thing where we watch it. I'll keep mentioning this on our streams because we watched the episode with an unsullied friend, and she had Frida, and she's been had very interesting reactions to things.
Yes.
As someone who she's never even seen Game of Thrones, like she doesn't know anything.
Totally unsullied.
Totally unsullied. So it's been
she's
super
unsullied
interesting.
and vocal. It's a great combo for us getting takes that we wouldn't have expected.
But so basically, she saw little Lena, and she's like, "No, that can't be." And she's like, she starts laughing at how ludicrous it is. Like that was her reaction. That was my reaction too.
Like, don't
it just
marry
looked
him.
silly, like that can't be the case. And then it cuts straight from Lena to Viserys and Alicent, and Frida goes, "Oh, this looks a lot better in comparison now." She it was very transparent to her that they were trying to make that seem a little better.
Her other big reaction was to seeing who it was Corlys was talking to.
Oh yeah,
it's like when Corlys is like, my family,
like, came around.
Yeah, and they're showing all the artifacts and his like loot and his cool like room that he's sitting in, and she's like, and he shows that it's Daemon. She's like, oh, it's getting real. Yeah.
I also guessed in that moment they were clearly slow rolling who that was going to be, and I was like, is he going to be Kriston Cole? When is Kriston Cole going to become a bad guy? Daemon makes more sense.
Yeah, he was like, oh, that does make a ton of sense.
Being Kristen right there. That
moment. You're just really waiting for Kristen to fit in somehow. Like, how is this going to happen? You're really on edge for that. Yeah.
I saw someone on Twitter post the comparison or the reaction of Viserys with the 12-year-old girl. Have you seen that little bit? It's like a guy in a subway just going, "Police! Police! Help! Police!"
So sort of like last episode, this episode starts with not talk of the Stepstones this time. It's a kind of gruesome scene of crabs and crab feeding on.
But it's beautiful at the same time. The Stepstones, like that the shots of like, it's so like sparse and bare with all, I don't know. Like I found myself very struck by the beauty of it all.
Yeah. All those crabs, like how did they get them all those crabs to do that? Like, is that CGI?
I asked some people, I think apparently crabs, some people told me, I don't know if I should believe them, that crabs are known to do that. But
gather in large amounts. We see the walk of the
I
crab.
kind of think that I would guess that he carries barrels of crabs and he lets the crabs loose, but that crabs will eat flesh even if you're still alive.
Yeah, in the book it says they're just staked out on the shore, and then high tide comes and the crabs just come to feast. They smell the food.
Yeah, so maybe they just come. Maybe you're right, and that he doesn't actually. It's such an interesting thing to me that the crabs just eat like alive people, and like if they're dead, but one of those guys was still alive and moving and the crabs were eating him. So that's like very brutal.
That's gruesome. So it was brought up at the beginning of the last episode, then kind of let go for a while, and then brought up right away again here and at the end. It's clearly a big setup for at least the next episode, probably more than that. But a great point of comparison here is Corlys says one of the reasons they're doing this is they have no reason to fear us. We've given them no reason to fear us. He says, what reason do they have to fear us? On the other hand, the reason people have to fear Crag-Has Crab Feeder is what he's doing, first of all, with the hammering stakes to the beach and letting his foes get eaten by crabs. Second of all, look at the guy. I mean, we're not supposed to judge people on appearances too much, but this guy's a real challenge because, man, he looks like a villain. But he's also apparently been struck by grayscale. That's apparently why.
That's what I was wondering. I think I asked my wife at the end of the episode. I was like, is he supposed to have grayscale? I think
nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did have grayscale. And in the behind the scenes, they have a great look at them applying it all and showing how far up his body it goes. And they talk a bit about why they chose to go that way. And it really, the crux of it really is just like, they thought it would make him creepy and scary and all that. And it's true. They also gave him like that cool hammer that you were referring to, Aziz. That was pretty dope too.
And I wonder if he, it looks like, or not wonder, it looks like he wears a variety of masks. They are somewhat similar, but it looks like there's some different colors to them. Maybe that's just the way they come out in the stills, that they have reflections on them or something like that. But I'm not entirely clear on that. I'm sure we'll get clarification on that later. It's a small thing. I'm just curious about the costuming. So
any pirate worth his salt would have more than one mask.
What kind of pirate only has one mask? So this sets up allies of circumstance. Corlys is very frustrated over the long-standing inaction, which is, he points out how it's harming the realm, but it is harming him most personally, as while also harming the realm, because his ships are the ones most directly impacted. His profits are the most directly impacted. He's got the most ships, thus he stands to lose the most from the loss of shipping routes. And here we have Daemon with lots of setbacks. Both of them have been suffering setbacks. They have both been rejected on their marriage plans. They've both been rejected by the small council in a sense, or at least pushed back against, or at least insulted by. They both have lost out on their personal ambition. And a lot of it is it's not stated, but a lot of it is at the hands of Otto Hightower. Otto outmaneuvered Corlys on the marriage. Otto is allowing, potentially Corlys could see it this way, as Otto is allowing the situation of the Stepstones to continue because it makes Corlys weaker. It lessens his hold on the council and lowers his esteem in the king, one of the two most powerful houses at the time. You can see why Otto might be like, if we just let this problem linger, the House Valyrian loses some prestige and some power, and that's exactly the kind of thing he would want to see. So that's not stated outright, but it's a strong undertone. Both Daemon and Corlys have big problems with Otto. But also, as we pointed out earlier, Daemon hasn't actually proved himself in anything. All he's done is flexed his muscles as a prince, shown how invulnerable he is to consequences. But he hasn't.
Even in attorney, he freaking cheated.
Yeah,
right.
He did.
He lowered his lance to the horse's legs. So.
And no one called him out
that's
for
a
it.
good sign for battle. I feel like you want to cheat in a actual war. Should show
like,
that he might actually be pretty good fighting on the Stepstones if he's willing to fight dirty.
That's a good point. So he needs to prove himself against real opponents, and this crag-ass crab feeder is shown to be pretty severe, pretty serious. At least he looks the part of a villain. And so, Shay, you wrote in here, that is a Sons of the Harpy mask.
Yeah, they did. He salvaged it along with other things from other places. But yes, it is confirmed in behind the scenes.
But he's not Giscari.
No, he's not Giscari. He's just a traveler.
So that's very interesting. So he's been around, like Prince Admiral. He's like got little minor Euron vibes there, where he's been to a lot of different places and stolen a lot of different stuff from a lot of different people. And so that's that will, if Daemon can defeat a man like that, then he'll have some serious rep all of a sudden. It's funny to think of Daemon being classified as green in this case, because the greens and blacks, he's not a green, but Lord Hightower is.
He is sometimes also.
At the moment, that's still going over my head, just to be clear.
Sometimes he's also green with envy.
Yeah, green with envy. That's true. There is some green with envy. The greens, there's many meanings to green here. But yeah, so we'll come back to that, what that means later when it starts to happen. But I don't think it will be long. I believe the greens and the blacks will sort itself out before the older actors come in. So that means it'll be within the next 3 episodes.
Do we know? Is that been announced? Like when that shift will happen?
Yeah, between at the halfway point. Yeah, between 5 and 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Something I've been speculating on.
So I guess that's a slight spoiler, but everybody knew it was coming. They just didn't know when it was coming.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll call that a minor one. Okay.
It makes sense that they wouldn't have changed 2 episodes with the end of the season to the old actresses. So,
yeah. One thing we're curious about, which we'll discuss later in research, but we just want to drop the mention now, is there seem to maybe be some scenes in previews for this episode that maybe didn't get used. Maybe they were cut, like Daemon going to get the egg. Right? There were scenes in the trailers for that. Maybe that's coming later.
In my theory, I think I determined that I think that is later. I thought that it was cut originally, but in the photo, Daemon has short hair. And in this scene, he has long hair.
And the egg is a different color, too,
and
right?
the egg is a different color, exactly.
That's a really important clue as well. The hair is a huge clue, but the egg is perhaps even more of a glaring thing. It's a bronze egg he's holding in the scene where he's pulling up another egg. And this was a very dark black, like oily black egg. So
I watched the previews before the season started to there's just hype. It's exciting, but I'm trying hard to not go back and analyze and figure it all out. I want to take it as it comes.
Yeah.
But I did remember that, and so I'm sort of assuming that this episode was maybe setting the stage, like the precedent has set for him to sneak in. And I thought that maybe if he's going to go off and adventure with Corlys, I wondered if maybe he would even get a second. That's part of my question earlier about how many total Targaryens are there. I wondered if there would be some other dragon rider, and he's coming in to get another dragon or to get someone to go with him. Or maybe even someone who's not a Targaryen could ride a dragon, and I'm not sure.
A non-Targaryen riding a dragon? Yeah. No, actually, you're onto something there.
I mean, Dany had 2 or 3 dragons. Could
the Night King wasn't a Targaryen? He rode a dragon.
Or was he? But anyway, maybe he could still manage more than one dragon even if he's not riding them, or maybe someone else could ride it. Anyway, I do sort of suspect part of him teaming up with Corlys is going to include sneaking back in and taking an egg or a dragon or something.
Worth noting here is that Rhaenys is a dragon rider. She has a dragon of her own that we have not seen yet in an episode.
Corlys is not.
But
Rhaenys
is.
Yeah.
And so you could imagine that perhaps her children might be dragon riders. Clearly, Laena, at the very least, has an interest in dragons, is my point. Like, she's talked all about dragons that whole scene.
That reminded me, Vhagar, was that one of the Aegon's
That was Visenya's dragon. It's the largest living dragon at that point.
An oldest, which is usually one and the same. But
but I guess Valyrian is dead, but Vhagar is MIA.
Correct.
So, and what was the third dragon?
Meraxes was Rhaenys' dragon, but Meraxes died
Meraxes was
in
killed
Dorne.
in Dorne during the Dornish.
Okay. There's a reference to that in the intro sequence. Rhaenys' little bloodline circle has Meraxes' skull with a bolt through it. That's what they chose to define her. Great. I would love that if I was Rhaenys.
Death moment, yeah.
Like, I did all these things. I was known for poetry and all this. You're gonna define me by my death.
So
maybe the bolt has a poem written on it.
Answered prayer. So let's talk about some callbacks, references, minor mentions, other miscellaneous details. A really clever Easter egg is the very beginning of the episode. They're announcing the death of Sir Ryam. Sir Ryam's last name is Sir Ryam Redwine, and this is what's on screen. They says Sir Ryam's died, and they're literally showing a glass of red wine. Nice. Clever. Otto uses the phrase, "if you choose violence" here, which is maybe a callback to Cersei's "I choose violence" in season, I think, 7 of Game of Thrones. That was a popular line because it was part of the trailers ahead of time, and we were all excited because it was in reference to Ungregor, the mountain. We're like, oh yeah, we want to see him in action. So, yeah.
I remember someone on Twitter changed her name to "I choose violin."
Nice.
So
That's good. I like that. Otto uses the phrase, that's about to repeat the same point twice here. Alicent, his daughter rather, asks Viserys if Westeros could be another Valyria, which is an odd question, but an interesting one. And it makes me think of Euron, actually, because Euron,
dancing's enjoying.
A lot of the theories around Euron in A Song of Ice and Fire are that he's going to take the High Tower, which Alicent has never even seen, but because she was born in the Red Keep. But still, she's a High Tower. So she's the one, and a lot of the vibes are Euron is trying to turn Westeros into a new freehold of Valyria. And so that is maybe a nod to that, or maybe just a coincidence. I'm not clear on that. I'd love to hear other takes on that one, but
hopefully they're truer to the word freehold, if that is the direction they go.
There's 2 mentions of the Ironborn in this, and we're wondering what role they'll play. Certainly in book canon, there is a role for the Ironborn, a pretty significant one. And the 2 mentions are pretty subtle. One of them is the candidate for Kingsguard, Ryman Mallister. Otto says, wait, we might want him because his family is chief in charge of fighting the Ironborn. Like, that's their primary duty for centuries. That's what they've been. And she's like, give me someone who's, have they fought any Ironborn lately? Has this guy fought any actual
Ironborn?
Ironborn?
He would have fought some Ironborn, but clearly he didn't. He looked old enough that I feel like he would have actually had some fighting. But clearly not.
That's actually canon.
Oh.
Because when
I guess you're right.
Theon says, or maybe it's not Theon, but someone said, I think it's Theon who says that the bell, the warning bell, the Mallisters' Ironborn are coming tower hadn't rung in hundreds of years until the Greyjoy rebellion of 290, Balon's rebellion against Robert. So,
by the way, shout out to the casting department for that Mallister. There's just something about him. He looks like a Mallister to me. He looks like an eagle. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else is going to agree with me. I don't know what the quality is that I think is Mallister-esque, but that guy was a good cast.
It didn't go very well for them this trip to King's Landing. The one guy gets refused for the Kingsguard, and one of the others was killed. He was one of the bodies that was just dragged away with a bloody head. So one of the Mallisters was killed in the tourney. So yeah, this is like a big whiff for them. They missed on both counts here.
Yeah, that's true.
Too bad for them.
By the way, I kind of made this point earlier. I've maybe mentioned it in the past in general. If the Mallisters have held the Ironborn at bay for so long that they haven't needed combat, like, hey, that's the guy I want. If you're so good at fighting, you stop anyone from fighting you. I think that's better than someone who was not established enough that someone tried to fight.
How did you get them to stop? Yeah, we need that. Like, use that on this crab feeder guy. Whatever you did, let's do that. The other mention of the Ironborn is not even in the subtitles. When Viserys is getting ready to announce that he's marrying Alicent, he's staring out the window, and he's kind of lost in thought. And the council comes in and they're talking. You can barely hear them. And the only word I could make out was, two words, was blah, 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 Iron Islands, blah, 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 blah. So two of the counselors were chatting about it as they walked in. I think it was Strong and Melos, or Strong and maybe Otto. No, I think it was just Strong and Melos. Yeah, maybe there's only two it could have been. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then one of the other little tidbits that relates to this is the new Lord Commander of the Kingsguard is Harold Westerling, the excellent Graham McTavish. The Westerlings, remember who the Westerlings are, Sean? Does that name ring a bell?
It does. Are they a branch house of Lannisters? Am I remembering?
They are a vassal of the Lannisters, not a branch, but
and
just a
they've
vassal.
married into them as well.
Remember who Robb Stark's bride was a Westerling, Jane Westerling.
Jane Westerling, yeah.
But there was a different Jane Westerling, was one of the 6 brides of Maegor the Cruel. And the Westerlings... Also, a current Westerling is married to the Lannisters right now. The current bride of the Lord of Castle Rock is Johanna Westerling. She's, if they go this route in the show, she'll be very important, taking the role of the Mallisters, fighting against the Ironborn while the realm is at war with itself. The Ironborn are like, hey, here's our chance. And Johanna Westerling is like, guess it's up to me. Yeah,
she'll be like, and as much as some people are missing the more heroic characters, I feel like she'll be.
They're coming.
There's a bunch of characters like her that are coming that are more clearly heroic. They're still not all just going to be like 100% good. It's war, and you have to do terrible things that people will debate. But there's a whole lot of more likable characters.
We're only 2 episodes
in. So far, all we have is Kristen Cole.
A couple of folks noticed, Ashaya, you included, that this Daemon Mazzaria moment has some Stannis Melisandre vibes. The way they're looking out the window at Dragonstone there, and they're not a married couple, but they are together.
And tell me you couldn't believe that was just Stannis and Melisandre.
Yeah, Melisandre's hair was like that in some moments.
She had that piled on top bun. It's like an SOC look. Like, I think they're trying to, they're drawing from that iconography of that being an SOC style of hair.
They're on Dragonstone. She's from another land.
Was formerly enslaved.
As a child.
Can't have children.
She's advising him to go a different direction than he was planning.
He's a second son, right?
Yeah,
he's
sulking.
He's jilted by his brother. Yeah. The Stannis Daemon parallels are rampant. But we've been through that in another spot. So let's talk a little more lore, like a little deep cut lore stuff. This is some of the most fun stuff. This will be our last topic today. All the cool stuff at Driftmark, which apparently we're going to see more of. But that was just a tease. Ryan Condal, in fact, told us in the interview today, he's like, you just got a little tease of that. There's going to be a lot more Valyrian like loot and stuff that they made to make his castle look cooler. Like, that barnacle thing? What is this bust with barnacles on it? Like, what the heck is this thing? All I can say is it's cool, but I got no idea what's going on with that. That skull thing, too, like it looked like a deep-sea creature of some kind, like a sea serpent or an eel. Maybe it's a sea snake. Hey, it could be a sea snake.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fish head.
Yeah, it does look kind of fishy, but I
mean,
eels are half fish, sort of.
Is it a roly-poly fish head?
Yeah. He mentions that the driftwood throne, which is similar in concept to the driftwood crown of the Ironborn, but in this case, it was supposedly a gift of the Merling King to House Velaryon long ago. This is the legend that they may have made up, but maybe there really was a Merling King that gave it to them. Who knows? Maybe the Merling King was a person who just called himself that. He also suggests that House Velaryon is older than House Targaryen, which he says certain texts say that. I would like to see those texts. Please FedEx them our way, Lord Corlys. We'll happy to peruse that for you.
He's certainly a biased source.
Yes. And again, it's to try to put himself on an even footing with Daemon before he makes this pitch to invade the Stepstones. So there's a bit of an ulterior motive here. And Daemon sees it, but we covered that part.
Precedent has been set for him to overreach.
Yes, that's true.
I wonder how many more times it'll happen.
We also have the Valyrian lore, which, as I said in our interview with Ryan, he expanded on a few things. There's this building that Viserys calls the Anogrion, which the subtitles gave us a spelling on. I don't know if that's an accurate spelling, but whatever. And it's the building where the blood mages do their business. They do blood magic there. And Ryan referred to, like, they had technology. They had things like artifice, magical artifice, perhaps,
that they used to keep track of the bloodlines and how it worked, and the thing that you see of the bloodlines is not just something that they,
Yeah, so he basically hinted at the idea that they could track blood mages could track bloodlines and like almost like a DNA test or something along those lines, which is a really fascinating idea that I had never thought of before.
Yeah.
It's really neat, like a way to track your own ancestry. Like it's 23andMe for old Valyria.
From Martin's interview that you did, he specifically wants to avoid having a quote unquote system for magic.
Yeah.
But our interpretations can allow something like maybe Valyrian blood, like a pH test or something. Yeah. Maybe there's you expose it to phosphorus and it turns green. Like, okay, they're Valyrian.
Yeah, they can ride dragons. They have the gene
point.
Or something. Yeah.
Yeah, they judge it whether it turns green or black. Yeah. So that's great. And he also, Viserys alluded to the fact that the highest ranking Valyrians lived closest to the center of the volcano. Like the castle was built into it. And the closer you are to the heat and flame, the more powerful your magic. We speculated that in our Dragonstone episode, if you recall, Sean. We talked a little about that. Maybe some of it's yet to be discovered with Stannis has been down there. Melisandre took him down there, and Salladhor Saan tells Davos about this. And we'll probably see it when Daenerys goes to Dragonstone and actually goes into these tunnels and caves herself, maybe with Tyrion at her side. So we'll actually probably have a POV look at this later, but tantalizing for now.
Spun off in a bunch of thoughts at one point because there's still a bunch of like cause and effect questions, right? He called it the source of their magic. Is the volcano the source of their magic, or do they store the source of their magic in the volcano because it's safe there? Did the source of their magic blow up and cause the doom of Valyria? I think Martin also alluded to the fact that something went wrong, that caused that. So
yeah.
Anyway,
so another interesting observation. It's only 2 episodes, but so far the Dragon Keepers don't seem to speak common. They seem to only speak High Valyrian, which kind of furthers their development or their conception as a Valyrian thing. Maybe they're somewhat monastic. There's a reason that they are kept away from just mixing with other people, just to keep them focused on their duties. Like that's why I use the word monastic, because they seem like they're segregated from the rest of the population.
Yeah, they might think it makes it harder for them to corrupt. Makes it harder for someone to
like bribe
you
them.
Can't bribe them. You can't, do anything to get at the dragons.
They can't teach someone else how to do it.
Yeah.
They're always seemed like a little disheveled and dirty. Like that's just part of their like.
It's hard raising dragons.
Yeah. So and it just raises the profile of both episodes. There's been multiple dialogues in High Valyrian, which is super fun for us nerds. We love that, and I'm sure we're gonna keep getting that We already talked about Dreamfire's egg going into the brazier.
But nice to get Dreamfire.
But the word Dreamfire, that name's been around for a while. We've been aware of the dragon Dreamfire for a while, but the name Dreamfire is suddenly a lot more evocative now that we have more Targaryen dreamers on record and more room for potential with Targaryen dreams. So the name itself just speaks, it's just more suggestive than it was before. Before it was just a cool name. Like, Dreamfire, that's really cool. Now it's like, more ideas. Is there dreams? Shea's idea of Viserys like seeing through Balerian's eyes, the multiple mentions, both episodes so far, Viserys mentions that Balerion was the last living creature to see the Valyria before the Doom. And so they really want us to make sure we know that.
Yeah, I even wondered if we would get some sort of flashback. I don't know quite how it could be relevant, what they would be wanting to show us. Maybe it's even setting up something that's not even in this show. I don't know how much of like a world they're planning, but it seems like a seed.
Yeah, a dragon seed, if you will. Yes, so that's really cool. I believe we already.
I also want to point out that Dreamfire was hatched while Aegon reigned. During the reign of Aegon. I wonder who named Dreamfire, because obviously Rhaenyra was the one who tamed her but that was after she didn't hatch Dreamfire. So that's interesting. I wonder if she was named before Rhaenyra.
Interesting. If Rhaenyra named Dreamfire, that's super interesting, because we have already theorized that Rhaenyra is the conduit of the knowledge of the dream going from the usurped Maegor's line back to Jaehaerys, because Jaehaerys, his place was usurped, and then he got the throne back. So who would have told him the secret? Rhaenyra might be the one, because it was her brother that was killed by Maegor, and her place that was usurped. So maybe she would have been the one that was told alongside her brother when they were in the position to be heirs. So that looks pretty good. That's a quite possibility. So anyway, Dreamfire got a lot more interesting. GMK9 says, History of Westeros, how did he steal the egg and no one knew? Well,
they knew.
They did know.
That was the whole point, which is why I brought that up. I wanted to clarify that Daemon wanted to get his brother's attention by doing something showy, so he clearly just waltzed right in there, said, hey, I'm going to take an egg. The Dragon Keeper said no. He said, well, you're not going to stop me.
And they didn't.
And they didn't. And then and still his brother did not come, even though he sulked there for 6 months, thinking his brother had to come deal with him. And he didn't. So he went and tried to provoke them.
They can't really stop him, basically.
Yeah, they can't stop him.
He doesn't have permission, but they can't enforce that. It's very similar to Jaime Lannister's line when Cersei went into labor and he goes into the birthing chamber and they're like, men aren't allowed in here. And he's like, which one of you is going to kick me out? And they're like, all right then, you can stay. So I think this is very similar. He just walked in and was like, who's going to stop me? And that's where they're like, Viserys even says it, how could you have let this happen? They're like, well, it was Daemon. What were we supposed to do?
Otherwise they would have probably killed the person.
They might have stopped some random person. Yeah, they probably would have. Yeah.
Another parallel was Rhaenyra on the bridge, and was it Otto? Someone said, hey, escort her back to her dragon. She's like, get out of my way. Yeah. Don't upset my dragon.
Yeah, she says, my dragon is very protective of me. Yeah, that was a clever line.
Coming through. Yeah, you guys aren't stopping me here. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty smooth. That's the old velvet glove threat there. It's like, there's a fist in this glove, but I'm presenting it nicely, like, my dragon is protective. Yeah, it's like, don't mess with it. Yeah, that was good. I like that. Very good dialogue. I was very impressed again with the writing of dialogue and everything else, but
I think that is a good thing to point out here, is that they don't have much dialogue to go off of for this. They have a few lines here and there, but it's really dialogueless, and so they have the plot, they have the world building, they have the setting, but the weakest, and casting is usually going to be pretty good, but the weakest, the biggest risk was the dialogue. Yeah,
and it's been good. There's already been some like memorable one-liners so far. One of my favorites is from last episode. There's yet to be a man born who lacks the patience for absolute power. That's one of my favorites so far. But
I think we know Sean's favorite.
What's yours, Sean?
You'll learn.
Oh yeah. That is really good. And the other one, Rhaenys's line is, "Men would rather put the realm to the torch than see a woman ascend the Iron Throne." That's a real,
very powerful line. Well written, not only significant, important, but well phrased, poetic. You know.
So, folks, how about this? Send us your favorite one-liners. Drop them in the chat. Send them to us on Twitter. Drop them on Discord or Facebook. We'll be following along with this all season long to find our favorite lines. Maybe at the end of the season, we'll do a little
that would be fun.
rundown of some of our favorite lines amidst other end-of-season preparations. But I don't really want to think about the end of the season just yet. We got a long way to go, and I'm not eager for it to be over.
I want to say another one that I'm hesitant to call my favorite because it's kind of like dark. It's something I don't want to root for, but it was just well presented and, I don't know, poetic, like you said. It was... Time will tell.
Time will tell. That was a good line. Yeah,
you're right.
Just 3 words and says so much. Absolutely.
Yeah. TKOK Podcast Network sends a super chat, says, "Give me a telenovela spinoff of Daemon and Kristen just being snarky and making out a lot."
Their ship name is Daemon.
Yeah, just Daemon. Yeah.
Daemon. I will say that I'm on board with Daemon Kristen. I'm more on board with Daemon Otto after Emwelia tweeted a great comic.
Dotto?
Yeah, I call him Ottoman.
Ottoman, yeah, that's
Ottoman.
good.
That's good.
Ottoman.
But no,
I saw that 3-frame comic.
do an Ottoman
where he's like,
Empire.
"Oh, are you looking for me?" And he like shows off his butt. It's really funny.
I was wondering when you'd come.
Yeah, it was.
Handcuff me.
Something that we're going to look into that we haven't.
I put it on
there
the
it is.
Screen.
Handcuff this.
That's from Emwelia.
Look at that middle column. You found me.
I don't know if y'all know, but this is based on a very iconic comic strip.
Nope.
Anyway, this is a reference to something that it's very on point. So anyone who knows that comic will appreciate this.
I do not. Something for when we have more time is we're going to take a closer look at the architecture of Dragonstone, compare it to this Valyrian model, and see like if there's any comparisons, if there's any things that are similar. But that's something that we didn't have time for in the less than 1 day since the episode aired. But that's something to look at, as well as the intro sequence, which we talked about at the beginning. We're going to be taking a look at that, probably make a video on just that. Remember to join us on Saturday at 3 for the next preview episode. And, of course, next Monday at 6 for another one of these non-spoilery episodes. Do you have any final thoughts, Ashea or Sean?
Just that I'm very excited to release the Ryan Condal interview, hopefully late tomorrow night, Tuesday night. And I just really want to say I had a good feeling about going into the interview, but he was just really knew his stuff and passionate, and I really liked talking to him about the series.
Yeah, same here. He was great, no doubt.
Yeah.
Y'all will see for yourselves not long from now. What about you, Sean? Any final thoughts?
Just one note that I had that never came out is I appreciate Viserys' reluctance to use the dragons. I don't even remember if I mentioned last episode, but he was like, men should have never messed with these in the first place. I don't know how active George or Ryan Condal are trying to parallel them to nuclear weapons, but that's how I see them, and I really appreciate the reluctance to use them that he has, whatever other faults he may have.
I'd love to speak to that actually for a second. I didn't address that, but that made me think about why Viserys would think that, what he saw, what he saw that turned him off the dragons, or what unnerved him, or whatever. Was there an impetus for that? And maybe he saw some violence, or maybe he saw something. But I was thinking about the idea that if Vhagar is very old and is kind of deteriorating, that Balerion was very old and would have been deteriorating. So it might have just been, one, unnerving to see like a kind of rotting away, like a dying dragon, and having a connection with this might have been a lot. Two, Balerion might have just been so ancient that it was hard to be in Balerion's brain type of thing.
Bonded to a creature that has dementia.
Yeah, that kind of dragon dementia, like some kind of thing like that is possible. My point is that Balerion might have been particularly unnerving to Viserys, being bonded with this very powerful, large, old, ancient dragon.
And since we have Vhagar foreshadowed to be part of the show, I mean, the fact that huge dragon exists is clearly a clue something's going to happen there. And we're told very interestingly that Viserys has this great line where he says, yeah, even dragons can get lonely, because Lena says that people hear the song of Vhagar on the coasts of Driftmark, which is their home island. That was maybe not made clear that Driftmark is the Valyrians' island, so Vhagar might be there, which is a clue as well. But if someone bonds with that dragon, maybe they acquire some of this loneliness, or maybe the dragon becomes less lonely. But it's an idea that maybe that deserves a little
me so sad.
tension.
It's so funny to me how I feel so sad about these damn dragons when they're just killing machines. They're gonna they kill so many people. But I feel that there's lots of animals I like that have killed people. It does make me think about that type of perspective, because I really think about the dragons dying, and I get all weepy and I get sad about it. But then I try to tell myself no, it's really kind of for the best ultimately that they're decommissioned if I try to look at it in those terms. But it's not decommissioning, it's killing a living creature, so it's not that simple. Related
to your point about Balerion too, Ashea, is that Viserys says to Rhaenyra, he's like, I'd rather face the Balerion the Black Dread than face the Black Dread than do this. It's like, that was your dragon.
Yeah.
Were you afraid of your own dragon? So that was a very telling, that the example he used was his dragon. Was like, I'd rather face I'd rather face my daughter, or face the Black Dread than face my daughter. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, sometimes. He was not
sometimes,
always, but sometimes.
It's some moods that he's in or she's in. Yeah. So that was I
can imagine a million different reasons for it. Some might be some personal connection to Balerion, or Balerion having some flaw or whatever. But we have seen over and over again how destructive and dangerous they are.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need some weird subtext to just understand they're very dangerous and very powerful, and a power that maybe men shouldn't have, which is what Viserys says. And even Dany was presented with the burnt child that a dragon killed. That might be something Viserys also has to deal with. If there's 10 dragons flying around every now and then, they just burn some village up, and he just feels devastated about these innocent people that were killed. And
you know what?
I can see a million reasons.
That's a great reference, Sean, because I think it's Rakara or Ego, one of Dany's blood riders, points at Drogon and says, "There's Balerion born again." The Black Dread born again. And Drogon is the one that, like you said, is the one that kills the child, and poor Hosea, the little girl, instead of sheep. So you might be onto something there. Yeah, maybe Balerion did some extracurricular murdering of humans that wasn't sanctioned by whoever the writer was at the time. We'll see. I'm sure we'll get more tidbits. The show seems committed to giving us little mini lore drops like this and filling out some of the history. So something to look forward to amongst all these other things to look forward to.
My one other closing final thought.
Sure.
Follow me on Twitter. Engage with me on Facebook or anywhere. It's obviously about this show or Better Call Saul or whatever else.
Yeah, do it. Sean, at Dancing Sean on Twitter is his Twitter. We're at Westeros History. Ashea is at Miranese Not. So yeah, why not follow us all while you're at it?
Yeah, you're right. There might be some new folks in here that haven't been following our podcast before this. So that is a good call in general.
We'll definitely recommend you check out the synopsis before each episode. We put a good amount of work into those. Ashea put some great visuals and some humor into that. Also, make sure you check out our Ryan Condal interview, our George R. Martin interview, some related episodes, the Freehold of Valyria. We've got an episode on that. We've got an episode on the Valyrian Wars of Expansion. We have an episode on the Doom of Valyria. We have an episode on the Stepstones. We have an episode on the Free City of Lys, which of course relates to Mazzaria and Craghass Crabfeeder and some other characters that may yet come along. And of course, we have an episode on Dragonstone where we mention some of the depths and some of the symbolism, some of that stuff about Stannis and Aegon and Daenerys and what we could expect to see. Maybe we'll get some new clues throughout the rest of the season. Until next time, we hope to see you on either Saturday at 3 and or Monday at 6.
I'll see Andor soon, too.
Andor. Yes. We weren't trying to talk about Star Wars, but that word, it just gets an Andor. Yeah.
Don't get us started.
That's right. So until next time, Valar re-read us and Valar re-watch us.